Hello and welcome back to my channel. Make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. Let's begin. Chapter 43, Hell on Earth. Ichigo sat in the uninhabited woods he'd found, bitterly clenching and unclenching his hands. He longed to be out there finding whoever had the audacity to abduct his mother, but he was helpless unless he wished to doom Masaki to hell. He sighed, bringing one knee to his chest. He hated simply sitting around when there was something important happening. What happens if we can't find that person? Would I have to stay here in Soul Society, forever unable to talk to anyone? Would I have to abandon my life as a human? No one would ever be able, or allowed to find me. Ichigo looked at the sky. A lonely existence, was this what you gave the Hogyoku to me for, Aizen? Did you predict something like this would happen? Sighing, Ichigo steadied his resolve. He knew that his mother would be released in a few days, and then there would be no way to tell who the culprit was. Should that happen, Ichigo knew that he would have to abide by his orders. Despite his threat to Yamamoto earlier, Ichigo knew he wasn't emotionally capable of slaughtering all of Soul Society. Yet, the substitute Shinigami finished with closed eyes. It was almost an echo from Kazidor de la Luna. Ichigo had to be truthful if only to himself. He knew there were circumstances that would drive him to such atrocities. One had only to look at his resurrection to know that there were no limits Ichigo would not break to protect everyone he held dear. But he hoped from the bottom of his heart that it would never come to that. Ichigo sighed again and allowed himself to rest. His internal philosophical session had left him emotionally drained, and hopefully a little nap would help recover his Ryuryoku faster. Yuruchi watched the Shinigami carefully from atop the branch she stood on. Below her was the Kido core, and she was waiting for her opportunity to slip into the library to look the records. It didn't seem like much had changed from her time as head of the Onmitsukido, which was fortunate for her. The building itself was separate from the others, a safety precaution given how many Kido experiments went on in the hidden complex. The top was made of glass, allowing Yuruchi a perfect look inside. She'd found out once that it was a purely aesthetic touch to the library, as a project to allow natural sunlight to illuminate the library so it would have a more natural feeling. Of course, the glass had been spelled to be nigh unbreakable. Glancing at the sun through the boughs of the tree, she noted it was fast approaching time for dinner. Perfect. It didn't take long before she spotted the librarian calmly walk outside and lock the door, before binding it with multiple silent bakudo. The door glowed a multitude of colors. The spells took effect, effectively protecting from anyone who could not break such a combination of high-level bakudo. Yuruchi rolled her eyes as the librarian left, apparently satisfied with his precautionary measures. Fool. There's more ways to enter the building than just a door. Leaping down from her tree, Yuruchi casually strolled over to one side of the building, and without a second thought broke one of the side windows with a swift kick. Quickly jumping inside, Yuruchi transformed back into her human self. She had to work quickly, and that meant she needed human dexterity. Ignoring her NDTY as was her custom, it did not take her long to locate where the records were kept. Every time the Kido Corps was called on to use their advanced knowledge to perform Kido that were not capable of being done by anyone else, they were mandated to keep records just in case it was abused. When power is involved, accountability is everything, Yuruchi mused to herself. Yuruchi rapidly flipped through the books, looking for the orb that Ichigo carried. Time passed, until she was sure that dinner had to be over and the librarian would be on his way back. She continued, and then her eyes paused. She'd found it. Making a quick note of the page, she swept the rest of the books into her arms and hurriedly placed them back on the bookshelves where she'd found them, making sure to put them in the correct order. Yuruchi closed the record book that she'd found the answer on, and transformed back into a cat. Picking it up by the spine gently with her teeth, Yuruchi felt the bakudo dissolve. She had no time left. The librarian entered, and looked around. For a moment, he'd thought he'd felt some ryatsu, but after a few seconds, he shook his head. Must have been residual from the bakudo ending, he reasoned. He was rather tired, after all, and hadn't done a perfect job of canceling his own work. The goddess of Shunpa flickered away expertly, carrying the book. She had a ways to travel to reach Ichigo again, assuming he hadn't moved far. Upon arriving almost 20 minutes later, she discovered him on the ground, leaning against a tree in a light doze. Sighing, Yuruchi decided to let him sleep. She had no idea how much Ryatsu it was taking for him to be manifesting Zangetsu for so long, and he had seemed entirely too stressed lately. With good reason, she reminded herself. Setting the book down next to Ichigo's hand, she jumped into the tree and kept lookout. Zangetsu observed calmly as Byakuya expertly found the appropriate tome from the Dereshikero and flipped to the end. Well. It seems that there are 3 noble families who have ordered a sufficiently sizable amount of sekiseki from the Pokaire family within the last year, which is the earliest any nobles could have possibly learned of Kurosaki Ichigo's existence, Byakuya stated coolly. The records state that the Kasumiyaji are experimenting on a new weapons forging technique, the Shiba are making their home more difficult to locate, and the Barin are expanding and securing their library. Zangetsu's found himself frowning much like his wielder did so frequently. What is the Barin family known for? Byakuya gave no reaction to the question for several seconds as he gathered his thoughts. They are not known. The Barin family is rarely seen or heard from, and while they do appear at social gatherings, I do not recall anything concerning their duties as a noble household. Duties? Byakuya closed the book of records and set it on the appropriate shelf as he clarified for the Zanpakudo. The noble families are called such as the Spirit King entrusted them with responsibilities. For example, the Kuchiki family chronicles the history of soul society, and should we ever be called on, it is our duty to provide it to our government. I see. What of the Kasumiyaji, and the Shiba? The Kasumiyaji family was tasked with being masters of weapon forging. While the Shinigami rely almost solely on Zanpakudo and Kido, there are occasions where specialized weapons are required. The Shiba were tasked with relations to the Rukongai, and they began to specialize in fireworks. However, their status as noble house has degraded significantly since Kaien Shiba died. Zangetsu's expression remained unchanged, but he found himself wishing he was back with Ichigo. I hate politics, nevertheless, he would not abandon Ichigo. I propose we separate and individually investigate the Kasumiyaji and the Barin until your servants can locate the Shiba. Byakuya nodded acknowledgement. I concur with your plan. I will speak to the head of the Kasumiyaji. I will assign another servant to take you to the Barin mansion. Without waiting for response, the Kuchiki head turned on his heel and left the Dereshikero. Zangetsu followed without a word. Meanwhile, back at the 1st Division HQ, Yamamoto was in a 3-way conversation with 2 of the most dangerously intelligent Shinigami he'd ever known. Urahara, describe the Togabido that you fought. The Togabido was formerly the hollow known as Shrieker. Urahara briefed the leader of the Gotei. He wore a full-body black covering and a plain white mask. Nevertheless, when Shrieker spoke it was without the hollow double-tone effect. I believe that the covering was somehow important to his escape, but without further knowledge of the workings of hell, I cannot be sure. Mayuri's grin could barely be contained on his face, it was so wide. Ah, but unlike you, I have been studying hell. His fingers flew across the keyboard as it pulled up the called-upon data. Reports from those who have seen Hell's Gates indicate that an entity pulls the Togabido inside, and this matches the readings in Karakura on the occasion that a hollow is dmed there. It is likely the guardian of the gates, if you will, as the Ryatsu that emits from the last several times Hell's Gates have opened has been near identical. Urahara looked pensively through his viewing monitor at his Soul Society counterpart, looking at the data he'd acquired with a thoughtful hum. I see where you're going, Mayuri-kun, and I have to agree. Assuming that there's only one way out, Shrieker would have had to get past the Guardian. His outfit may have cloaked his presence and prevented the Guardian from reopening the gates and pulling him back through afterwards. We won't know for certain until one is captured and detained without the ability to retreat back to hell, Mayuri pointed out. As we don't know how it's done, we have to assume they're like hollows in that they can open a way to Hueco Mundo from anywhere, as long as they have the power needed, Urahara mused. Which would make sense, considering that Shrieker was a hollow before being sent to hell. Some high-level Bakudo appears to be in order. I will see what I can do, and call you again when I have more details. Very well, Yamamoto deemed before disconnecting the call, which disconnected Mayuri as well. Urahara sighed. He'd gathered some new data, thanks to his former student, but it was fairly evident that Mayuri had been stymied by Yamamoto's refusal to release classified information. And as a result, they were in the dark about how the Togabido had managed to escape. The need for security had once again trumped the ever-present desire for knowledge that all scientists had, and now it had backfired. Story of every free thinker associated with a larger organization, I would surmise. Looks like I'll need Tessai's help again. And maybe some of the Vizard to help out, but I don't know how to contact them without Ichigo, and he's off in Soul Society. Urahara made his way back up the steps unhappily, dreading going back out and having to slay more hollows. There was research to be done. But he paused right before reaching the door and sighed. You do realize I was once an assassin? You know you can't hide from me in my own shop. Soi Fon. From the shadows of his shop, Soi Fon emerged. Still facing Urahara's back, she swallowed hard. Urahara-san. I need some assistance, and I don't know who else to turn to. Oh. And why would I assist you, Soi Fon, when it was reported to me by Soul Society that you were the one who abducted young Kurosaki Ichigo's mother? I dare say Ichigo-kun is coming for your head, and I have half a mind to give him a ring. I would really rather not be on his bad side, Urahara commented lightly. He had no such intentions. The mere fact that Soi Fon had come to him was a pretty good indicator that Soi Fon was being framed, and was, in fact, coming to him for help clearing her name while staying under the radar for the time being. That wasn't me or my men. Soi Fon hissed in protest. I was framed and you know it, Urahara. I would never accept someone stupid enough to leave a note that all but proved my guilt, let alone in my handwriting. If I truly were to abduct Kurosaki Masaki to blackmail her son, I would do it in someone else's hand to throw people off my trail. You should know that Urahara, since as you so rightly pointed out, you were once an assassin too. Yar. Urahara stalled for time as he bowed his head, smirking to himself in the shadows of his hat. I love it when I'm right. So, I take it you need shelter and some aid clearing your name? I imagine Yamamoto would be more likely to interrogate you just in case. Hi, Soi Fon admitted grudgingly. Well, as it happens, I am in need of some help myself. Urahara said brightly. You see, it turns out that the Hell Dimension has gotten closer lately, and somehow or other its residents, the Togabido, found a way to escape to the living world. We don't know how or why, and that's where you come in. You capture one, bring it to me, and I do my thing. In return, I provide food and shelter, and lie to Soul Society if they ask if I know where you are. I'll also let Yuruchi know what's going on so she can search on your behalf. Does that sound reasonable to you, Soi Fon? I hardly have a choice, now do I? Soi Fon muttered bitterly. But she knew it could have been far worse. All Urahara was asking was for something she'd have gladly done on an official mission from Yamamoto Sotecho, or if Yuruchi has asked her. The Hell Dimension was not something anyone wanted a part of. Fine. How do I identify these? Togabido? Only one has appeared so far, but it can be assumed the rest will have similar characteristics. They will be humanoid, with Ryatsu very similar to that of Hollows but distinctly off, and will be wearing an all-concealing black cloak, with a white mask. Soi Fon looked at her benefactor disbelievingly. That's an extremely vague description. Urahara looked up with a faux surprised expression. Is it not enough information, dear Soi Fon? I thought you were a better assassin than I. Shut up. It's more than enough information for me to do this job where you cannot, the Onmitsukido commander spat, striding past the door and flickering away. Urahara waited a few beats to make sure she was gone before chuckling to himself. Ah, Soi Fon is as easy to rile up as ever. He turned around to go back to his lab, He needed to go invent a device capable of keeping a hollow from using Garganta. Theoretically, considering that both were forced rips from one dimension to another, it would work on the Togabido to keep them from retreating to hell. He'd never bothered to invent such a thing before, as up to that point, it was simply more efficient to purify the hollow before it could escape that way. But Shrieker had opened one easily, and had been in hell for a relatively short time. If he can do it that quickly, then any others that come through should be far more difficult to pin down. The natural light coming in was fading fast, indicating that the sun was beginning to set. As though that were a cue, Urahara's phone rang. "Hi. Urahara-dano, we are coming back inside. Hollows have ceased to appear for several minutes, and Soi Fon Taicho has just arrived stating that she will take over the hollow duties for the moment." "Very good. Thank you, Tessai. Let Soi Fon know that the forecast for tonight is heavy rain, so if she needs to dry off and get warm she is welcome to come back inside." "Hi, Urahara-dano." The phone clicked as Tessai disconnected, and Urahara absently put it back in his pocket as his thoughts once more turned towards his work. Soi Fon watched the sun set dispassionately, replaying the events that had led to her current situation. Flashback. Soi Fon Taicho. The Onmitsukido commander looked up from her unending paperwork, only to see her rotund Fukuteicho looking considerably panicked, with ridiculous amounts of sweat seeping from his forehead. "What is it, Omida?" she asked wearily. "It's bad, Taicho," he babbled. "They're coming for you." Soi Fon repressed a shiver from the cold that suddenly crept up her spine. "They?" she asked critically. "Be precise, Omida." "Hi. Taicho, Kurosaki Masaki has been kidnapped from the supervision of one of the Kuchiki attendants, and a note was left in your handwriting incriminating you." This time, Soi Fon could not keep her eyes from widening in surprise and a hint of fear. "I swear I will come at you with all of my power. Kurosaki is coming for me, just like he said he would." The thought chilled her bones. "Omida, I am sending you on a priority mission. You are to hide from the Godei 13 until Kurosaki Ichigo or Shihoin Yuruchi-sama comes to you. He will interrogate you for my whereabouts. Tell him the truth, that you don't know. At that point, you are to explain what you do know concerning the investigation. My life depends on you reaching him before he reaches me. Make yourself clear that I had nothing to do with this. Do whatever you must to make that happen. Am I understood?" Omida had paled considerably, but nodded slowly. "Hi, Taicho." Soi Fon promptly vanished at speeds that she knew that Omida had no chance of following. She knew her best chance lay in following in Yuruchi-sama's footsteps, escaping Soul Society and hiding in the living world. End flashback. Soi Fon never thought she'd have to depend on her portly Fukuteicho, but he was her best and only hope to prevent Kurosaki from slaying her in a righteous rage. "I wonder how he's doing." She snorted aloud. "Probably cowering in fear somewhere. I should have approached one of my teams of Onmitsukido." But she knew she couldn't. They had no idea of Kurosaki's power, and would probably get themselves killed trying to subdue him. Omida's fear for once would work in his favor. Then something undeniably wrong stabbed at her senses, and Soi Fon involuntarily turned around and began to shunpa towards the source. It's like a hollow, but not. Despite herself, she had to admit there truly was no good way to describe it, and that Urahara Kisuke had done his best. Then another popped up a distance away from the first, and Soi Fon made a sudden realization. They're coming in force. Sheet. Sure enough, a third joined the first two, this one halfway across the city. DMN, this was well planned. I need reinforcements. The last one appeared in another location further away from the rest, and they began to spread out. They're searching for something. Soi Fon diverted her course to attack the one closest to her. As Urahara had said, the Togabido was rather nondescript, wearing a black cloak and a white mask but otherwise humanoid. However, this one was rather gigantic, even larger than Kamamura's impressive 9 feet 5 inches tall stature, and possibly twice as broad, though his gargantuan hands were almost as tall as Soi Fon herself and had chains attached to his wrists that rattled every time he moved. Perfect, a large target. Shuanpeng right behind the giant, she launched a powerful aerial roundhouse kick right at his head, hoping to knock him out, bind him, and deliver him later. Her leg connected perfectly, but the Togabido was only knocked to the side a few feet. Turning to face her, he visibly readied himself for battle. Too slow. Soi Fon had already launched herself directly in front of him, braced herself, and snapped off a split kick that buried itself into the giant's diaphragm. It also undid several of the square buttons on his cloak. The Togabido leapt back with a high-speed technique that was unlike either Shuanpa or Sonido, and his giant hands frantically fumbled to redo his buttons. The cloaks are important, Soi Fon realized. Now she had a target. Not letting her opponent have the time to fix the cloak, Soi Fon lunged forward with her sword drawn, intending to slice the cloak straight off. But the still silent Togabido once more evaded, and finally managed to finish buttoning up. "Now I'm warmed up, Shinigami," he announced in a deep and threatening tone. "Time for you to die." With that, he threw a right cross with his gloved hand, and suddenly his arm from the elbow down launched at high speed at Soi Fon, connected by a chain to the rest of his body. Soi Fon dodged easily. "You're all muscle," she criticized derisively. "Not nearly fast enough to catch me." "No." The Togabido yanked back with his shoulder, arcing the remainder of his arm upwards. Sensing danger right behind her, Soi Fon Shuanpaed out of the way, just in time to see the hellbound soul's massive hand clench in midair right where she'd been a second before. "Still too slow." "Perhaps," said a new voice, and Soi Fon spun around in midair to see another of the Togabido higher up than she was. "But so are you. You will never stop us from finding what we are searching for tonight." "And what are you searching for?" "You will see soon enough." The newcomer vanished, and before Soi Fon could turn around, she felt a hard chop to her neck, and everything went dark. Shuran dropped Soi Fon on the ground carelessly. "Continue searching, Garagai," he ordered. The giant nodded and vanished. Urahara's head snapped around as one of his special computers beeped loudly at him in alarm. "What? Soi Fon's Ryatsu has just dropped, and enemies are still in the area. She must have been defeated." Snatching Beneheim from where she lay against the wall next to the door, the ex-assassin leapt out into the rain. From what he could tell, the Ryatsu signatures were spread throughout the city. They were searching for something. But I have no clue what that something could be. Urahara Shuanpaed toward Soi Fon, hoping to get to her and fix her wounds enough for some assistance. He was almost there when suddenly a fifth signature appeared next to one of them, and their signatures rose as if they're fighting. Urahara redirected his course, seeing a potential ally in the works. However, he apparently was not the only one who had noticed the strangeness, as the other three Togabido began making their way to help their comrade. It was then that Urahara recognized where they were converging. Ichigo-kun's home. DMN it, Ishin is at the hospital helping them deal with the aftermath of transferring Karakura to Soul Society and back, and he can't get away. Yuzu and Karen are in danger. Urahara's eyes narrowed, rain soaking his clothes, but he didn't care as he drew his beloved Zanpakuto and put on another burst of speed. "Awaken, Beneheim." Karen stared at the newcomer as he struggled to hold back his opponent. She and Yuzu had been carried outside by some freak wearing a cloak with two tentacles for arms, but the new guy had appeared out of nowhere and cut off part of the freak's tentacles, which allowed her and Yuzu to drop. The new guy was dressed in a ragged thin white robe, with a black sash tying it closed and a black garment that covered his neck and collar. Below the garment dangled two broken ends of red chains, which was emo enough in Karen's opinion, but he also wore skin-tight black gloves that reached midway up his forearm and a manacle on his left wrist, which also bore another few links of a broken chain. The stranger's hair was sheer white, like that Hitsugaya Toshiro person who she had seen a few times, but was largely covered by yet another pitch-black strip of cloth that had been mostly wrapped around his head, even covering his right eye and cheek. In short, to Karen, if it weren't for the wicked obsidian sword he wielded with obvious skill, she would have thought him a disfigured, colorblind, emo beggar. "Run, you fools," the stranger yelled at her and her twin. "There's nowhere for them to go," the tentacle freak replied calmly, whipping at his opponent. "Shuran will find them no matter where they are. You can't protect them forever, Kakudo." "Heh, I don't have to," the newly identified Kakudo replied with a smirk, deflecting the attack skillfully. "Someone else is coming to help out." "I think not. He'll be kept a bit busy with my colleagues." Just then, another Togabido, the giant, appeared and snatched up both girls with his enormous hands. "No!" Kakudo cried out in defiance. "No, you can't take them." Leaping away from the strange tentacles that reached to grab him, Kakudo lunged at the giant and swung mightily with his blade, only to be blocked by the chains that the giant bore on the wrist that wasn't holding the girls hostage. "You cannot cut the chains of hell with that level of power," the tentacle-wielding Togabido criticized. "We'll be leaving now, we have what we came for." Karen's eyes widened, and she met Yuzu's terrified gaze with a matching one, which was just enough for Yuzu to begin crying. Ichi and I, the more emotional of the sisters cried out. "Save us. Ichigo will come and save us," Karen threatened. "That's what we're counting on," Shuran's voice agreed as he appeared nearby, walking towards them calmly. "Hush, now, it's time to go to hell." "Hell." Both twins' mouths opened together in horror, and called out for the one they knew would always save them. "Ichigo," they screamed together. "Ichigo." Ichigo snapped awake in an instant, up on his feet almost before Yuruchi registered that he'd awoken. "Ichigo, what?" "Not now, Yuruchi." He could still hear the echoes of Yuzu's and Karen's scream for him, and he knew that they were in deep trouble. He didn't know how he knew, but there was no time to theorize on the matter. Yuzu and Karen are in trouble. A moment later, Ichigo ripped a Garganta into being without even summoning his mask, and without a second thought jumped through. Yuruchi followed less than a second after, transforming back into a human and Shunpying to keep up with Ichigo's own high speed. Only seconds later, the two of them broke through to the living world, and Yuruchi's eyes widened for a moment. If she remembered Urahara's theories about Garganta, then the distance one had to travel in the void between dimensions had two factors: the relative distance between the dimensions, and the power used to bridge the dimensions together. If the dimensions were close, then the trip would be short. But if they were far away, as was the case with Soul Society, as they had the Dangai between the living world and Soul Society, then sheer power could shorten the trip considerably. The sheer power Ichigo pushed into this trip, it's more than I could produce normally. It was raining as Ichigo stepped out of the Garganta with a fearsome scowl on his. And then he saw the Togabido that held his sisters in its gargantuan hand. The whites of his eyes faded to black as a burning rage took him. The Ajucha's mask materialized without being called, and Ichigo summoned his white Shirkai blade. Ichigo's hollow eyes glowed with power as he lunged towards the BSTRDS who had dared to attack his family. A bright blue Getsuga seethed around the whole blade as everyone turned around in shock. Not daring to unleash the Getsuga where his sisters could be hurt, Ichigo brought down Zangetsu on the arm of the giant who held them. The cleaver cut right through the cloak and arm as if it were made of butter, such was Ichigo's focused rage. Yuruchi appeared a moment later and quickly retrieved Ichigo's sisters, retreating to on top of the roof. "Ichi and I, the guy in white is on our side." Yuzu cried out in warning. "His name is Kakudo, and he was delaying them from taking us." Karen added. It was a good thing that his sisters warned him, because otherwise Ichigo would have slashed out at Kakudo as he approached. "They are Togabido, residents of hell. Be careful, it's supposed to be impossible to cut through the chains that bind them to hell, so they'll use it as a defense." Ichigo fixed the assailants with his most ferocious glare. "Then I will make you wish for hell when I'm through with you," he roared, flaring his Ryatsu right before he shunpaed at the congregation of them. Ichigo released his grip on the white Zangetsu before snatching at the white cloth swinging in a wide Getsuga-covered arc at the Togabido. They scatter, most of them jumping up and over the blade of seething power. But they did not anticipate Urahara appearing right above them, Zanpakuto released and shining red and black. Shibari, Beneheim. A long black and red energy net emerged as Urahara swung his sword, and it caught the 4 Togabido in mid-jump, slamming them back down to earth painfully. Urahara landed easily a moment later. And that should be that. Now then. But then the 4 Togabido bellowed in unison, their Ryatsu flaring and forcing part of the net to dissipate under the pressure of their Ryatsu. Garagai, take the woman. Taikon, keep the new guy occupied. Gonjo, retreat for now, get reinforcements. Hi. The one with tentacle arms vanished in a high-speed technique that Ichigo did not recognize, but seemed similar to Sonido. Now then, the one who had been speaking said with a smirk audible in his voice, looking at the hollowified Ichigo and Kakudo easily. Shall we? You have no idea what you're up against, Ichigo breathed harshly. Is that right? I know exactly what I'm up against, Kurosaki Ichigo, Vizard, Slayer of Aizen. I know all about your Resurrection and your Bankai, I know your Getsuga Tensho. I think you're the one who has no idea who you're facing. Allow me to enlighten you. The abominably smug Togabido bowed lightly. I am Shuran, a Togabido, one who will be free of hell forever. You know my Resurrection? Ichigo demanded uneasily. Then allow me to prove to you that you know nothing. Blacken the. Don't. Kakudo warned, grabbing Ichigo's arm and halting his attempt at resurrection before he could complete it. That's just what he wants, Ichigo. You transcended Shinigami and Hollow when you fought Aizen, right? He thinks that you may have transcended the powers of hell too. If you attack him with your full strength, you might break through the chains that bind him to hell, and then he'll get even stronger. Shuran stared at Kakudo, and while his expression was hidden behind his mask, his voice betrayed being disconcerted. You're well informed, he finally said. Now, Gonjo. Suddenly, Ichigo felt something very familiar materialize nearby. Spinning around quickly, Ichigo gasped when he saw a red portal materialize right behind his sisters. Move, he screamed desperately as he shunpaed towards his family, but it was too late. He did not have the godlike speed of Bankai to be boosted by his hollow power. He was forced to watch as 2 tentacles snaked out and grabbed Karen and Yuzu around the waist, making them scream in fright before pulling them through. The portal closed an instant before Ichigo reached it. Retreat. We have what we came for. Shuran yelled, opening another portal directly underneath him. The other Togabido joined him less than a second later with their high-speed techniques. Don't let them get away. Ichigo screamed in white-hot fury, Shunpai down towards Shuran even as he channeled even more Ryatsu into the white Zangetsu. Getsuga Tensho. Shunko. Yuruchi called out, her NDE form now crackling with white energy as she blended Kido with Hakuda, Shunpai towards the enemies with the speed that earned her the title Goddess of Shunpa. Urahara materialized right behind the 3 Togabido less than a moment later, tag-teaming with Yuruchi to attack on 2 fronts. Sing, Beneheim. Even Kakudo leapt into action, attacking from one of the sides with his obsidian blade. An explosion of Ryatsu occurred as all 4 attacks connected, but when the smoke faded, only no one had suffered any damage. Every one of the Togabido had used their chains to block the attacks. Shuran looked almost disappointed as the chains showed no signs of damage. You should be far more powerful than that, Kurosaki Ichigo. And then before Ichigo could respond, the 3 Togabido fell into the portal and it closed behind them. Yep, Ichigo just failed to protect his sisters. He was caught unprepared and was unable to use Bankai, which made him simply too slow. Prepare for a major breakdown next chapter. I figured the Shiba clan would be public relations, given their specialty in fireworks. Keep the populace happy, you know. This is what happens when you have several plots going on simultaneously. The Kasumiyaji Bakoto thing is going to occur, along with the kidnapping of Masaki, and the Hell chapter. And Ichigo can't be everywhere at once. But we all know where Ichigo is going to be. I gave Soi Fon what I hope was a believable story for why she disappeared, and a decent fight scene. Shuran is faster, stronger than her though, which is why she was defeated. Chapter 44, of Heaven and Hell. Thunder crashed, and the rain started to pick up harder, but Ichigo paid it no mind. He had failed. His sisters had been taken to hell. No, he whispered, collapsing to his knees where the Togabido had disappeared, pressing his hand to the ground, reaching for that doorway that they'd taken. They can't be. His efforts became more frantic as he struggled to find an opening, any opening, some trace of something that would grant him access to that dimension. No, no. Yuzu. Karen. Give them back to me. Kurosaki. Kakudo started, but as soon as he finished the single word, Ichigo's hand was clenched around his shirt, lifting him off the ground and glaring with all his might. You. Who the hell are you? Why do you feel like one of them? The Vizard demanded. So you could tell. Heh. Alright, no point in hiding it. I am a Togabido as well. So why did you side with us? Yuruchi asked coolly, approaching. Siding with you? That's not quite correct. It's not so much as siding with you, as it is I really don't like them, Kakudo clarified with a smirk. I'm tired of them doing whatever they please. And that's enough for you to fight them? Urahara questioned mildly. That's the way it is in hell, Kakudo replied with a careless shrug. Care to let me down? It's not like I took your sisters. In fact, I'm probably your only way into hell. Ichigo growled, but let him down. He didn't trust Kakudo at all, but the Togabido was right, Ichigo had to rely on him. Why are you willing to help me? Because you're going to go fight them to get your sisters back, of course. I want them dead, you want them dead, we have the same goals, so it's an alliance of convenience, Kakudo replied flippantly, before his voice turned solemn. Besides, while everyone condemned to hell performed grievous sins, there are those who would betray their hearts to darkness for their families. Ichigo ripped off his mask and narrowed his eyes at the Togabido in front of him. He didn't trust him, but he had helped try to save his sisters, and he could use all the help he could get. Fine. Gimme a sec to check on something. He pulled out the special orb from his robes and channeled some Ryatsu into it. The image appeared, and what he saw immediately put Ichigo's hackles up. There were two men, and he watched one of them cast a Bakudo on Masaki. They're going to send her to hell. Is that so? Kakudo asked, leaning closer in interest. Didn't know the Shinigami could do that. They're not supposed to know how, Urahara explained. It's forbidden knowledge. We thought all traces of it were destroyed under Yamamoto Sotecho's orders, but apparently someone found it. Ichigo turned to Kakudo. I have to go save my mother, the more of my family is in hell, the harder it'll be to protect them all and get them all out. Kakudo nodded shortly in understanding. You're gonna have to make a choice, Ichigo. I can't linger long, Kakudo warned. I can't stay out of hell for any extended period of time. Hell has extremely powerful protectors that serve as both the punishment for those in hell, and for devouring intruders. We call them Hell's Will, since they respond to the needs of Hell's dimension. One of them will detect me outside hell if I stick around too long, and drag me back anyway, and then I will be drained for quite some time and unable to help. We must either go now, or you will have to find your own way to hell. Ichigo was torn with indecision for a moment. He needed to get to his sisters, but he knew that as he was, he could not keep up with the Togabido, their speed was too great for him to match without Bankai, and Zangetsu was in Soul Society. If he could save his mother while he was there, then that was one less person to carry and protect while possibly fighting his way out from the Hell's Will. Go then. I will meet you there. Kakudo nodded, and mere seconds later he had disappeared into another portal to hell. Ichigo took a deep breath. There were so many things to do, and quickly. He turned to the goddess of Flash, and looked her straight in the eyes. At that moment he didn't care if she were naked or dressed in the best battle armor Urahara could make. "Yuruchi, will you come with me?" Yuruchi nodded sharply. "Who all do you have in mind, Ichigo?" "We're bringing the Vizard, Renji, Rukia, and anyone else I can recruit while I'm back in Soul Society." Urahara arched an eyebrow, but declined to comment on Ichigo's choice of comrades. Gingerly picking up the arm of the giant Togabido that the Vizard had vengefully taken off, he turned to Ichigo. "Then, Ichigo-kun, I now have 2 samples of the Ryatsu needed to create an artificial gateway to hell. I will begin work on it immediately, but I don't know how long it will take." "That's fine. Yuruchi, I need you to go get Renji and Rukia. Urahara can tell you where they are. I'm going to the Vizard, and then straight to Soul Society. I'll meet you back at Urahara's." "What are you going to do there?" the former leader of Onmitsukido asked quietly. Ichigo turned suddenly hollow eyes at her. "I'm going to do what I have to." And then he vanished with a flicker of Shuunpa. Yuruchi kept track of him easily, but did not follow. Appearing at the Vizard warehouse, Ichigo pushed open the door without bothering to hold back his strength. It slammed open with a bang, making the assembled Vizard jump. "Ichigo?" Shinji asked, surprised. "Get ready for battle," Ichigo ordered with the weight of authority, his voice demanding compliance. "Meet me at Urahara's. He'll explain the situation when you get there. If you choose not to come with me, that's fine, but I will not teach you the rest of Resurrection. Make your choice." The substitute Shinigami ripped open another garganta and stepped into the void between worlds, making his way back to Soul Society. He knew the way, now. Re-emerging in Soul Society above the west gate to Siriidii, Ichigo plummeted to the ground and landed softly. "Ichigo?" Jidanbo queried. "Are you okay?" "No. No, I'm not. Let me through, Jidanbo. I'll tell you what happened later." "Alright, if you're sure." The gatekeeper, still looking uncertain, nevertheless raised the gate, allowing Ichigo passage. Ichigo took a step into Soul Society and began to Shuunpa to where he could feel his sword was. Zangetsu raised his head as he recognized the Ryatsu of his wielder coming towards him at high speed. His brow furrowed in mild confusion as he continued to follow the Kuchiki servant to the Barine mansion. Why is Ichigo here? If he needed me, why did he not call? He supposed he would find out soon enough. A few moments later, Ichigo materialized right next to him, uncaring of the other man standing next to him. Zangetsu, residents of Hell have taken Yuzu and Karen. Mom's kidnappers no doubt detected my garganta to leave, and they're already sending her off. We have to stop them. Understood. With a nod, Zangetsu began dissipating into erasure from the bottom up, rejoining with Ichigo. My investigation has led to the Barine family. Got it. Finally addressing the escort as Zangetsu finished returning to his soul, he asked, "Take me to the Barine mansion, and be quick about it." "Why yes sir." Shortly thereafter, Ichigo took a good, long look at the mansion, memorizing where it was and what it looked like. Done, Ichigo nodded. "Thank you. Now leave, and don't look back." The servant scurried off and Ichigo took another look at the orb, channeling more Ryatsu into it. His mouth opened, his heart stopped, as he witnessed his mother unceremoniously tossed into an eye-shaped red portal. He was too late. Ichigo fell to his knees. His whole family except his father, had been taken to hell. "How?" he whispered. "How can I have all this power, and yet be unable to even protect those closest to me?" "You have not failed them yet, Ichigo. Recall that Yamamoto was the one to issue the order to destroy all traces of how to enter hell. He will no doubt have retained that knowledge for a case such as this. If he cooperates, you may yet save them from being met." Ichigo rose to his feet again, renewed by the hope his Zanpakudo had given him. He vanished in Shuunpa, once more heading towards where he felt Yamamoto's Ryatsu. Remembering what Isshin and Urahara had said about Shinigami laws concerning Shirkai, Ichigo took a few extra moments to focus outside the door to the first division to seal Zangetsu, sheathing him. Funny how easy it is when I really need it. Striding right past Yamamoto's Fukutecho, Ichigo could never remember his name. The Vizard stepped up to Yamamoto's office and struggled to keep from just ripping the door off and demanding the information he needed. Instead, he knocked. Enter. Ichigo did so quickly. Kurosaki Ichigo, why are you here? I need the information on how to enter hell. Yamamoto's eyes opened slightly from the slits he usually kept them at. Denied. Ichigo's anger flared, and he struggled to keep it in check. My sisters, he hissed, were kidnapped by the Togabido no more than 15 minutes ago. And my mother was sent there not 5 minutes ago. I must know. I will not reveal that information, Yamamoto ruled with a heavy voice. You are too valuable to risk on a mission to hell to rescue 3 souls. And how will you keep them from continuing? How many souls am I worth, Yamamoto Sotecho? The substitute demanded, unable to keep the sarcasm out of his voice. 20. 30. They will be unable to repeat their feat. Kuratsuchi Taicho and Urahara Kisuk are working together to develop a way to block the Togabido from returning, Yamamoto stated calmly. Ichigo took a deep breath to try to dissolve his rage, swallowed his pride, some things are more important than pride, and then got to his hands and knees, and lowered his head to the floor. I beg you. Help me to save my family. Protecting them, is the reason I gained Shinigami powers to begin with. Yamamoto was silent for a time, taking in the unexpected sight of Kurosaki Ichigo literally begging for the information. The Sotecho reflected for a few moments on how much that must have cost the transcended being, to bow and grovel for what he needed, when the boy had been able to achieve the strength he had through sweat and blood and trial. He is obviously not mad with power, if he is able to swallow his pride enough to beg from someone that he may be able to simply fight. Yet Yamamoto knew what would happen if Kurosaki entered the hell dimension. Kurosaki would be extremely prone to the effects that dimension's air had upon those who entered it. It was too big a risk. Kurosaki entering would only create one more casualty. I sympathize with your plight, Yamamoto acknowledged. It is a terrible thing, what has been done to your family. But I cannot allow you to enter hell. He was about to explain why, but Kurosaki jumped to his feet with betrayal, sorrow, and rage mingling in his expression. Fine. Looks like it's time for Plan B. And with that, Ichigo shunpaed out before Yamamoto could stop him. Less than a minute later, Ichigo stood in front of the Barine mansion again. He took a deep breath. There was no turning back after he did this. He hoped that his and Zangetsu's investigations were correct, because this was his last chance before having to rely completely on Urahara possibly figuring out how to get there. Ichigo purposely let his Ryatsu slip back to its unevolved state, and flared it as largely as he could. Tear the sky asunder, Zangetsu. Almost before the blade finished shifting into the magnificent cleaver, Ichigo was speaking once again. Bankai. His Ryatsu output skyrocketed, and Ichigo decided to take it a step further and drew his Jillian mask. The mansion shook under the weight of his power, and Ichigo channeled his power and began to shunpa. Only to be stopped in his tracks as 3 Taicho appeared in front of him with their own bursts of shunpa, blocking him. What do you think you're doing, Kurosaki? Hitsugaya demanded, Zanpakudo drawn. Beside him were Kairaku, and Yukatake, who had both drawn their weapons and were plainly ready for combat. Move. The Barine took my mother and sent her to hell, and they have a way into hell that I need in order to save my family. You don't know what's going on, and there's no time to explain it to you. If you don't move right now, I will kill every last one of you, Ichigo warned, bringing Tensa Zangetsu to bear. No, you will not. Ichigo paused as Yamamoto appeared in front of them, cane held in one hand in front of him. Reduce all creation to ash, Ryujin Jaka. The Taicho all took several steps back as Yamamoto's cane burned away to reveal his sword, alight with the flame of Yamamoto's Ryatsu. Get out of my way, Yamamoto. Ichigo screamed. Or you will see firsthand the power I used to kill Aizen. Is this what you have been reduced to, Kurosaki Ichigo? Yamamoto rebuked. Using force to achieve your goals. I tried diplomacy, you old bstrd. I begged you, I got on my knees and begged. I prostrated myself to you when I have done so to No1. I would have done anything, and you still would not help me save my family, you heartless old man. He heard Hitsugaya's quiet intake of breath. Yeah, that's right. My sisters and mother have been taken to hell by the Togabido. I'm not asking to risk anyone else's lives, I just need the way in and out so I can get them out. He spat at Yamamoto, and though the liquid evaporated long before it would have reached him, the meaning was clear. So forgive me if I am a bit less than charitable, since I've met hollows with more heart than you, Yamamoto Genryosai Shigekuni. Though Yamamoto's face remained unchanged, the flames that engulfed Yamamoto's sword grew larger and more intense to reflect his obvious anger. It seems that you have chosen your path. Yes, he has. Kuchiki Byakuya appeared in a flicker of shunpa next to Ichigo. Drawing his blade almost majestically slow, he addressed the Soteicho directly. Have you forgotten, Yamamoto Soteicho, that this is a matter between noble families? Kurosaki Ichigo is a retainer of the Kuchiki family, as you yourself witnessed and Zangetsu accepted on Kurosaki Ichigo's behalf. Kurosaki Ichigo was investigating the kidnapping of Kurosaki Masaki with the full support of the Kuchiki, and he has evidently come across a commonality between his facets of investigation. As you have observed, the fact that the note that we received indicated knowledge of how to send a soul to hell is extremely informative. To have such forbidden knowledge is not to be underestimated. It is highly likely that they have other measures in place to prevent my being able to catch them with that knowledge. Kurosaki Ichigo is here acting as my representative and bodyguard, and his current state of bankai and hollowification is meant to sufficiently paralyze those who would hinder us within the mansion, as well as detect the Sekiseki holding room that we believe imprisoned Kurosaki Masaki. So follow the laws you uphold, Yamamoto Soteicho. Allow me and my retainer to pass unhindered. Yamamoto audibly growled, but powered down his shurikai, lowering his blade. The other Taicho took that as a sign to step aside, and Byakuya nodded regally as he sheathed his sword. Come, Kurosaki Ichigo. Do not let up on your Ryatsu. If fortune is with us, its paralyzing effects will keep us from being disturbed as we find the ones who banished your mother. He purposely allowed his voice to be loud enough to be heard by the other Taicho, who now looked at Yamamoto incredulously. I will attempt to sense where your Ryatsu is unable to penetrate. Logic dictates that that is most likely where your mother was held. As large spiritual power leaves a mark on its location, we will be able to confirm that a portal to hell was opened there, and from there which members had opened it. Ichigo nodded bitterly, and the two of them began walking purposefully into the mansion. Meanwhile, outside, Hitsugaya had no idea what to say. Had Yamamoto Soteicho really just tried to prevent Ichigo from saving his family? And Kuchiki Byakuya, who had disliked Ichigo since practically day one, had defended him and called him a retainer to the Kuchiki? Had the world gone mad? But he knew one thing for sure, if Yamamoto had attempted to keep him from rescuing Momo from a similar situation, Hitsugaya would have fought with all his power. I suppose we're lucky that Ichigo didn't just decide to slaughter us all and come back for us later. Those fools. Yamamoto breathed. Those stupid, young fools. Yamaji, why did you try to stop them? For once, Kairaku's voice was stern and unrelenting. Yamamoto made a mental note that Kairaku was growing into his future position nicely before replying. It is as Kurosaki said. His sisters have been taken to hell. But he must not follow, the air in hell has an effect on all with hollow powers. It magnifies the hollow's effects on the mind, and for someone such as Kurosaki, who has bonded so deeply with his hollow powers, he will likely go insane in short order, and never return. That is why I would not help him. He did not give me time to explain this, but instead came here to take the information from those who hold his mother captive. He wouldn't have cared. Yamamoto turned to look at the calm but determined face of Hitsugaya Toshiro. Kurosaki wouldn't have cared if he would go insane or not. He would have gone anyway. His family means everything to him, and he would risk his very existence to protect them. He turned around and began to follow Kuchiki Taicho and Kurosaki Ichigo. "Do not enter, Hitsugaya Taicho," Yamamoto ordered grimly, even though he knew what was going to happen. Hitsugaya paused, then looked over his shoulder. "Kurosaki would do the same for me. I can do no less." And then he disappeared into the mansion. Yukitake looked between the mansion and Yamamoto-sensei uneasily, before he sighed. He could still hear the defiant, hurt insult that Ichigo had hurled at the Soteicho. "I've met hollows with more heart than you, Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni." The white-haired Taicho feared that with the rash, grief-filled words of a teenager who had lost almost all of his family, the chance of peaceful coexistence had evaporated as quickly as Ichigo's spit had. He didn't want to have to choose who he would side with. Because he honestly didn't know. Yukitake respected his old teacher, even if he didn't always agree with Yamamoto's decisions. But the sickly Shinigami also had to respect Ichigo's heartfelt desire to do whatever he had to in order to protect those he cared for. Wasn't that what I also strive to do? Should I be going with him? After a few moments' thought, he shook his head. They'll be fine. It's not like every Taicho can just up and leave at a moment's notice, and I can do my part by helping out with Shiro-chan's division. Kairaku, however, was having none of it. "Yamaji, we want the kid on our side. The best way to do that is to help him feel like he already is. That we will, within reason, support what he does. All you're doing right now is alienating him, and giving him yet another reason not to trust us. If he can't trust us to help him protect his family, what do you think he's going to do as soon as he gets back?" His voice had uncharacteristically risen into a yell as he struggled to make his point. "We had a chance to present the Godei 13 as something Ichigo could be comfortable serving in before or after his death, and now it's ruined. You've forced him to identify more with hollows. Think, Yamaji. He's a Vizard, and the most powerful Arankar still alive ally themselves with him. Urahara and Yuruchi, two wrongfully banished Shinigami, the founder of the Ran-D Institute and the goddess of Flash, are his teachers. Kurosaki Ishin is his father. Are you trying to start a war that we can't win? And what should I have done, Kairaku Shunsui?" Yamamoto challenged. "Simply given him the forbidden information on how to enter hell? I don't know, how about not blocking his way to his family?" Kairaku responded with rare amounts of sarcasm. "He slaughtered Aizen for holding his mother hostage. Imagine what he's going to do to you for trying to permanently condemn almost his entire family to hell." Yamamoto paused. That was potentially a valid point. Perhaps it would be prudent to be on guard for an attack. Ichigo extended his senses, searching through the mansion for a place where his mother would be kept. He paid no attention to the Barine servants who were on their knees, choking for air as Ichigo's Ryatsu pressed upon them, crushing them. He barely registered their existence, in fact. His mind is utterly focused on finding that room. "I believe I have found it," Byakuya reported a few seconds later. "You may stop releasing your Ryatsu now." Ichigo simply crushed his mask and switched his power back into its evolved state, so no one could feel it save himself. It was too much trouble right then to rein in his emotions. Nevertheless, Byakuya nodded in satisfaction. "Follow me." He vanished in Shuanpa. The Vizard followed easily. Moments later, they arrived at the door to the library. Ichigo pushed it open, and they entered. Inside was a large room, filled with scrolls and texts, some appearing ancient, some looking as though they were brand new, yet there was no one there. Byakuya frowned. "This room, it is not large enough." "What do you mean?" "The Sekiseki barrier extends several feet past this wall here." Byakuya raised a palm and rested it against on the bookshelves. I believe your mother's room may be behind the wall. Fine then. I'm going to open it up. I would advise against that, Byakuya warned. There may be traps if the room is opened by force. This requires some finesse, Kurosaki Ichigo. Look in the room for something that does not belong, I will investigate the wall and search for a hidden trigger. Ichigo nodded bitterly. It's a library. Libraries are for books and references and things like that. So what would be out of place here? He looked left, right. He could see nothing but desks and more books. His hands clenched into fists and Ichigo turned his gaze upwards, praying for the answer. His eyes widened. Byakuya. The ceiling. The noble immediately turned around and looked up. Above the two Shinigami, there was a series of torches, all of them lit with Kido, except one. Byakuya nodded. Well spotted. Heido 31, Shikaho. A perfectly controlled orb of red fire shot out and lit the torch, and Ichigo heard a very distinct click. The wall in question opened up just in time for the Vizard to see the portal to hell finish closing. Ichigo's face morphed into a mask of rage as he gripped the two perpetrators, who had apparently been busy closing the portal for the last several minutes, by their necks and started to squeeze. He could feel their Ryuryoka depleting rapidly as Ichigo's evolved Ryatsu began to crush their very existence, but he couldn't have them die. Not yet. He threw them at the wall, watching them crumple to the floor in fear. Ichigo stood over them, towering and glowering as though he were an angry god. And for all it mattered to them, he was. You two are coming with me, he growled ferociously. You are coming to the living world, and you are going to explain how to open that portal to Urahara Kisuk. And you're going to tell Kuchiki Byakuya everything he wants to know, or I will hollowify. He purposely let the whites of his eyes darken into hollow black. And eat your souls. And he will watch. The terror-stricken expressions on their faces were gratifying, but not enough to make Ichigo want to kill them any less. He knocked them both out with a relatively light chop to the back of their necks. Ichigo stepped back and approached his companion. I need them to share some information with Urahara, but after that, they're all yours. Given the current situation, I believe that is an acceptable arrangement, Byakuya granted. Very well. I assume you will make the appropriate arrangements with Urahara Kisuk. Yeah. I'll get them back to you when everything's over. Ichigo made a forceful effort to return his Ryatsu back to its unevolved state, picked up the two men who'd sent his mother to hell, and hefted them onto his left shoulder. Byakuya began to leave, and Ichigo channeled his Ryatsu and ripped open a garganta. Kurosaki. Ichigo paused. That was Hitsugaya. What is it, Toshiro? I want to come with you, to help rescue your sisters. The substitute nodded sharply. Fine. I'll take all the help I can get right now. Take one of these guys and follow me. We're heading back to the living world. Hitsugaya nodded determinedly, and they stepped through. Ichigo led the way, creating a mostly solid pathway to walk on, though there were occasional fractures and it wasn't very even. But it was passable enough to work with. It didn't take long before they entered the living world just outside Urahara's shop. Stepping out and landing softly, Ichigo didn't bother to knock before opening the door and stepping through, followed closely by Hitsugaya. Ah, Ichigo-kun. I trust your visit to Soul Society was eventful. Urahara greeted. Ichigo tossed him the still unconscious body he'd carried. This is a member of the Barin family. He and this other guy, Hitsugaya laid down the one he'd carried nearby, and Ichigo barely restrained the urge to kick him. Used a spell of some sort to open a portal to hell. Now my mother's there too. I thought you could pick their brains and hurry things up a bit. Of course. The others are in the underground training room if you wish to brief them. I haven't had the time, as I've been rather busy working on a way to get you in and out safely. Ichigo nodded wearily. Right. Come on, Toshiro. Hitsugaya didn't bother to respond with his usual demand to call him with a respectful suffix, it was hardly an appropriate time. Instead, he just quietly followed him down through the trap hole. Ichigo landed and quickly took stock on who all had arrived. Much to his gratification, all the Vizard were there except Hachigen. Yuruchi had managed to get Renji and Rukia there as well, though they were looking a little confused. She probably didn't tell them why they were needed. "What's going on, Ichigo?" Shinji asked, stepping forward. "Urahara won't tell us anything, but he's working with Tensai and Hachi upstairs on something." "Yeah, Ichigo, what's happened?" "I thought you were in Soul Society trying to find your mother." Rukia queried, confused. "Wait, his mother's in Soul Society?" Lisa questioned incredulously. "I thought she was eaten by a hollow." The substitute Shinigami was beginning to get a headache. "Shut up," he yelled, flaring his Ryatsu. There was instantly silence. "You're here because my sisters were kidnapped by residents of Hell known as the Togabido. Also, one of the noble families in Soul Society, called the Barine, kidnapped my mother and tried to use her as leverage against me. But in the end, she too was sent to Hell. Urahara now has the servants who sent her off, so he can re-engineer a way to get us in, and out, safely. There are only 5 Togabido that we know of right now, and one of them is friendly. His name is Kakudo, and he is waiting to aid us in Hell. I don't know who or what else is there waiting for us. I don't know how strong their forces are. I don't care about any of that." Ichigo's eyes glowed bright blue with determination. "We will get my family back, but I want more than that. I want those BSTRDS to realize they never should have come here like this. We're going to invade Hell and make it burn. I want them to be so terrified of my very name that they will sheet themselves every time they hear it," Ichigo swore. Renji shivered. He'd seen what his friend could do firsthand, and if anything Ichigo sounded even more enraged and vindictive than he'd been against Aizen. Looks like Ichigo's going to earn that nickname of his, Hell's Nightmare. But he couldn't just let Ichigo fight alone. Rukia, on the other hand, couldn't help but stare. She'd never seen Ichigo like this, ever. But then again, his family wasn't involved before. Now it's personal. Just like with me and that Kaien impersonator. She couldn't deny that the idea of going to Hell terrified her. It was forbidden to Shinigami, and completely unknown territory. But she would follow Ichigo anywhere. "If you want to back out, now's the time," Ichigo cautioned. "Because as soon as Urahara's done, we're going in." "We're with you," Renji and Rukia told him together without hesitation. "So are we," Shinji spoke for the Vizard. "We won't let one of our own do this alone. You're one of us, Ichigo. What they do to one, they do to us all." Ichigo's expression softened a little. "Thanks. Ichigo," Yuruchi called, getting his attention. "Inoue-chan, Ishida-kun and Sato-kun are on their way back." I didn't have time to tell them much, only that they were needed to protect Karakura again. The Transcendent being nodded in acknowledgement. "All right everyone, try to get some rest, because we need to be at 100%. Is there room for one more?" A voice from the corner of the room spoke up, a voice that made Ichigo tense and narrow his eyes before turning around. Soi Fon stepped forward. "Kurosaki Ichigo. I failed to protect your sisters when that was my task. Allow me the chance to recover my pride by coming with you to rescue them. Besides." Her eyes met Ichigo's willfully, "You know the power of my Bankai. Maybe this time, I can use it with pride." Ichigo's memory was a bit fuzzy of the occasion. He'd been temporarily insane at the time, and hyped up on hollow power to boot. She said it was a long-range type, and I remember something about a big explosion. Nevertheless, he nodded after a few seconds. "She'd be crazy to pull one over on us while in Hell. She's probably being honest." "Yeah, you can come." "I'm glad to hear it," Urahara's voice echoed in the training room as he slowly approached, carrying something that Ichigo thought looked like a bracelet. "We'll be able to open the portal shortly. This device will signal us to reopen the portal when you're done." it's a transdimensional transponder designed to react to pressing this button 3 times in 5 seconds. He pointed at the small red button on the side. It's designed that way to prevent accidental activation during any fighting you may have. Once Tezai and I receive the signal, we'll open the way back, attempting to home in on the transponder. However, due to the lack of testing, we can't guarantee where the portal will open in hell, so keep your senses about. He then turned and gave the bracelet transponder to Yuruchi, who accepted it solemnly and snapped it into place around her wrist. That done, Urahara stood in front of everyone and began to chant under his breath. It took only a few moments, and then Ichigo felt it, the feel of hell. Almost as soon as he thought that, a large eye-shaped portal opened in front of him and the group. "Let's go," Ichigo commanded, jumping in. Everyone else followed without a word. So, Ichigo's invading hell with a veritable army, and he's looking for some Okuiora-esque inspiration of true despair. Gonna be a far cry from the movie. I wanted to include the Vizard and Yuruchi because they really should have had more to do with the arc. I mean, if hell is gonna have an effect on hollows and Vizards, like they did in the movie, include more of the Vizard. Believe it or not, I actually did have hell's effect on the Vizard planned out before the movie trailers released that information. I'm really trying not to copy the movie entirely, but DMN it's like we think alike. I was originally going to have Hyori captured as well in order to induce the Vizard into meeting Ichigo partway into hell. But then I realized that there was no way for that to work. Hyori hates associating with anyone except other Vizard. She's never alone to be captured, and let's face it, if the Togabido had tried to take on the Vizard in their entirety, they'd have lost badly. Chapter 45, Abandon All Hope. Ichigo stepped out with the others, emerging on a large square platform. Ichigo. Ichigo's attention moved to his left, on a lower platform, where Kakudo was calling him. Shuanping to him to make room on the platform, Ichigo faced the Togabido with a serious expression. Kakudo. Kakudo raised an eyebrow as he saw the number of people come through. You've got a lot of friends, Ichigo. Yeah, I do. I wasn't able to prevent my mother from being banished here. Where would she likely be? Ichigo demanded coolly. Probably somewhere here, on the top level of hell, Kakudo replied, gesturing beyond the platforms. There were buildings and roads for as far as the eye could see, with strange monsters far too large to fit on the roads, somehow making their way without breaking the buildings. The creatures were the dark bluish-purple of the skin of a man starving for air, with elongated skull-like heads and enormous hulking arms and shoulders that forced them to walk on all fours. If Ichigo was seeing right, they were simply phasing through the buildings. This is where all souls first end up. On this level, the Kushinada devour the souls that are here. Everyone runs, and trains as hard as they can, but it's no use. No one has ever managed to defeat the Kushinada as far as I'm aware. What happens after a soul is devoured by a Kushinada? Renji asked quietly, who had approached during Kakudo's lecture. Everyone who dies in hell, is reborn in hell. Usually up here, but sometimes on the lower levels depending on how strong they are, Kakudo explained. Those who don't have a chain, get one upon their rebirth. Get eaten enough times, and you go insane. You'll see more as we move through. We have to find a good spot to dive down into the next level of hell. Shuran and the others are down on the 3rd level, so we've got a ways to go to get your sisters. But we have to move quickly. The air here in hell will kill any human after enough time, and then they'll be like me, a Togabido, regardless of whether they performed any sins in life. Then there's no time to waste, Ichigo acknowledged. Turning to address his comrades, he spoke loudly enough to be heard. We're dividing up into 2 groups. One will search for my mother on this level of hell. The others will join me and Kakudo deeper into hell. Renji, Rukia, Toshiro, you 3 will search for my mother, since you actually know what she looks like. Yuruchi, you go with them to get Mom to Urahara, and then lead the others back to me. Any objections? Rukia shook her head, remembering the happy poster of Masaki that the Kurosaki family had on the wall for as long as she'd known them, and the fear she'd felt when the Grand Fisher had molded its lure into Masaki's form to deter Ichigo's attacks. No, she knew Masaki's form well, and she knew that that was a valued asset. Renji and Hitsugaya exchanged a glance before silently assenting to Ichigo's orders. Both had only seen Masaki once, when Aizen had held her hostage against Ichigo, but the image was ingrained in their minds. Ichigo's outraged assault made it impossible to forget. Kakudo, what are we looking for in order to reach the next level of hell? Yuruchi questioned with narrowed eyes. The road's down there, look for a dead end, and then jump down, Kakudo answered easily. Not as easy as it sounds, though, most of the roads just lead into each other. Look in areas that have more Kushinada. Got it. We'll find her, Ichigo, Yuruchi assured him. Let's go, Renji, Rukia, Hitsugaya Taicho. The four of them flickered away with Shuunpa. Ichigo turned back to Kakudo. Well. Lead the way. Heh. The Togabido leapt down to the roads, closely followed by Ichigo, and then the rest of the Vizard and Soi Fon. Immediately upon landing, they began running. Keep your Ryatsu as minimized as possible, Kakudo warned, or the Kushinada will notice you and try to consume you. Remember that if you die, you're stuck here in hell. Hyori scoffed. I thought the point was to destroy everything on the way, Ichigo. My family comes first, Ichigo growled. If my mother wasn't somewhere on this level, I'd agree with you, but right now there's too much chance of accidentally killing her. If she dies, I will kill whoever killed her, and I don't care if she'll be resurrected down here in hell. Got it? He asked quietly with a glare. Hyori met his stare for a moment before turning away first. Got it. Good. Focusing hard and feeling his Zanpakudo's understanding and consent, Ichigo once again sealed Zangetsu, and kept his Ryatsu in its evolved state, that was about as undetectable as he could make it, and he could feel the others reduced to almost nothing as well. The Vizard seemed especially good at it. Ichigo couldn't say he was surprised. They'd had to hide themselves for a century, after all. As they ran, Soi Fon was relatively pensive, analyzing the situation as it stood to her. It did not escape her notice that she'd not been selected for finding Kurosaki's mother, despite having seen the admittedly beautiful woman as well. Mentally sighing at not being with Yuruchi-sama proving her worth, Soi Fon had to acknowledge that Kurosaki was being appropriately cautious. Flashback. If Yamamoto Soteicho ever suggests you need to be eliminated, I will be the first to line up for the job, Soi Fon promised. Kurosaki gave a bitter chuckle. Typical. End flashback. To her knowledge, of all the ones Kurosaki had brought to hell with him to save his family, Soi Fon was the only one whom he had not befriended, and she had actively threatened him. It made sense then, to keep Soi Fon nearby where Kurosaki and his allies could keep a close eye on her and, if necessary, take necessary action. Of Kurosaki's friends, only the Vizard would be physically and emotionally capable of killing her without mercy. Kuchiki had never killed a Shinigami before, and would hesitate. Aburai would not prove much of a challenge, even with his Bankai. Suzumabachi could take his life easily. Yuruchi-sama had emotional ties to Soi Fon, or so the assassin liked to think. But the Vizard, none of them knew her outside of her being a Taicho of the Godei 13, and they had been emotionally hardened by hollowification, and betrayed by Soul Society. Paired with the fact that they were Taicho and Fukuteicho even before hollowification, and they were possibly the best counter that Soi Fon could think of. Soi Fon observed Kurosaki warily as they continued to run across the street. As before, she still felt he was too immature, too emotional to wield Taicho-level power. If every Taicho let their emotions rule them as Kurosaki appeared to, the worlds would have been destroyed several times over, and that was without counting Yamamoto Soteicho. But it seemed he had grown somewhat, he made rational plans, and delegated when necessary. And he finally learned how to seal his sword, she noted with a mixture of satisfaction for the boy finally following the rules, and nervousness for how much control that must have required with his incomprehensible strength. Stronger than Zaraki, with far more control. She briefly imagined what the constantly battle-hungry Taicho would be like in Kurosaki's position, and repressed a shudder. On second thought, perhaps Kurosaki's self-restraint is something to be grateful for. All right. We've been lucky so far, not hitting any Kushinada, but we're approaching one of the dead ends now, Kakudo announced quietly, turning left at the next intersection. They'll sense us for sure, so be ready for some acrobatics. Don't get caught by them. They made another right, and this time there was a Kushinada phased right through the road, turning to face them. Hyori scoffed. They don't look that tough. Leaping forward ahead of the others, she materialized her hollow mask and opened her mouth wide, a red zero charging for only a second before being unleashed on the Kushinada in a blindingly bright crimson light. She kept up the zero for a few more seconds, before letting it fade. When everyone could see again, the Kushinada's head and shoulders had been obliterated. Humph. That wasn't so hard, she gloated, turning around as she pulled her mask sideways, keeping her hollowified eyes but otherwise wearing her mask on the side of her head. Hyori. Rose pointed behind her. She spun, and paled a little when she saw 3 Kushinada suddenly focus their attention on her and begin lumbering towards them. Run to the dead end and jump. Kakudo cried, bursting forward into a run towards the dead end. The others quickly pursued. Baka Hyori. Shinji chastised frantically as he sprinted alongside the snaggle-toothed Vizard. Now we have to avoid 3 of them instead of just 1. Oi, how was I supposed to know that would happen? Hyori protested, jumping up onto a neighboring building and leaping forward to dodge out of the way of a gigantic hand coming down towards her. It narrowly missed her, and crushed the building with several souls scrambling to get out of the way. The Togabido did say that it's very difficult for a denizen of hell to defeat Kushinada, Soi Fon answered nearby, as though it were fairly self-evident. So if one goes down, the others are at risk and will have to work together. You just didn't think it through, Lisa finished. Shut up, Hyori muttered, embarrassed at her foolish mistake. Doesn't matter, Kensei declared. We're at the end. Jump. And the 10 of them leapt down towards the purple miasma that was so far below. Emerging underneath, Ichigo was slightly surprised to see that they'd all emerged in a new area mostly covered by ocean, with a violet sky and scattered tiny land masses shaped like water lilies. Landing on the edge of one, Ichigo frowned and reached out with his senses. This place feels abandoned, he commented. There's a reason for that, Kakudo said aloud, landing next to Ichigo a moment later. The others had landed safely nearby, and were walking back to Ichigo to regroup. Look over there. Ichigo cast his gaze where Kakudo gestured, and saw an enormous skeleton inside the middle of the water lily-shaped island. It looked really familiar. Oh. Skeletons of Kushinada? Yeah. This is where they're born. Seriously? Love asked incredulously. Kakudo nodded. If too many people are here, for too long, the skeletons will become new Kushinada and will single-mindedly hunt the ones that awaken them. At least up there you've got a chance at distracting them with someone else. Down here, no such luxury. We need to keep moving. You're not going anywhere. Ichigo spun and drew Zangetsu in a single motion, slicing off a tentacle that had been ready to pierce him from behind. Just a single island over were 3 of the 4 Togabido, all still wearing their garb from when they'd invaded the living world. The Togabido who had attacked nodded, as though expecting that result. Kurosaki Ichigo. I am Gunjo. Shuran-sama awaits you further below, with your sisters. However, you are to come alone. Not a chance, you tentacle freak. Hyori retorted, shifting her hollow mask back to her face. The other Vizard, save Ichigo, stepped in front. Let us handle this, Ichigo, Shinji requested. You've got to get your sisters. We'll catch up. Ichigo nodded. All right. Soi Fon, Kakudo, let's move. Dive into the water, Kakudo ordered. That's the way down to the next level. Let them pass, Gunjo commanded aloud. We'll see them soon enough. I wouldn't be so sure, Togabido-san, Shinji criticized softly. Collapse, Sakanade. Blow it away, Tachikaze. Kensei's Zanpakuto quickly shifted into what appeared to be a military-issue combat knife with a bronze guard. Play, Kinshura, Rose almost sang, and his blade transformed into a golden whip, with a very pointy golden flower on the end. Crush down, Tengamaru, Love muttered, his sunglasses flashing as he hefted his now giant spiked club. Lisa adjusted her glasses, making them flash dangerously before raising her own blade. Smash, Haguro Tonbo, the Zanpakuto's hilt quickly elongated to being even longer than her body, the blade expanding into something resembling a monk's spade. Heh! Chop cleanly, Kobikiri Orochi, Hyori called out, bloodlust clearly audible in her tone. Mashiro looked at her Zanpakuto for a moment, but left it unreleased, instead drawing her hollow mask. It seemed to be a bee, or a hornet mask, which Ichigo took as rather enlightening. From personal experience, he knew that Zanpakuto and hollow followed a theme according to the owner's soul. His own theme was the moon. If Mashiro had a mask like that, odds were good that her Zanpakuto had something to do with the insect it resembled. But there was no time to theorize about it, Ichigo had to leave. As his Vizard companions readied for battle, Ichigo, Kakudo and Soi Fon dove into the depths of the ocean below. Renji leapt from rooftop to rooftop, his eyes constantly in motion seeking out the woman he'd only seen once. It was hard going, as most of the souls here in hell were cowering in fear from the constantly patrolling Kushinada, and the ones that weren't had gone either comatose or violently insane. Just then, he spotted a soul standing up nearby, with hair that resembled that which Renji had seen Masaki wear while captured by Aizen. Lunging forward, Renji pulled on the shoulder of the woman in front of him and twisting her around so he could see her face. "What's your name?" "Onimura Ayara," she whispered. Renji's face fell. "DMN. You're not her. Who are you looking for?" Ayara asked desperately. "Get me home and I'll tell you anything you want. I'll give you anything you want. Please," she begged. Renji shook his head. His heart ached, but he reminded himself that for her to end up in hell to begin with, she had to have committed very grievous sins while alive. Odds were that she deserved being here, and he was on a tight schedule. "Sorry, Onimura-san." Then he felt Rukia's Ryatsu flare, not much, but just enough to signal him. Gently but firmly removing the new Togabido's desperate clinging to his Shinigami robes, he shunpaed away. Arriving at Rukia's location, Renji found he was the last one there. Yuruchi and Hitsugaya Taicho were there already, and Rukia was speaking very quickly to an obviously traumatized Kurosaki Masaki. "Kurosaki-san, we're friends of your son, Ichigo," she rapidly related. "Ichigo found out where you were being held, but you were banished here before he could get to you." "Where is he now?" Masaki demanded, clearly suspicious of another plot. "He's looking on a lower level of hell," Rukia replied, carefully not mentioning Masaki's daughters. If the mother was anything like her son, then Masaki would stay and try to help even if it meant that she'd be trapped forever. "We're going to get him after we get you out of here. If people stay in hell long enough, they get med here regardless of where they are supposed to be. We need to get you back to Soul Society, but the living world will do for the moment," Hitsugaya stated. "We've already identified the culprits of your kidnapping, and I assure you that they will be taken care of." Yuruchi brought up her wrist and rapidly pressed the button 3 times per Urahara's instructions. "There, Kisuk should have a portal up and running in a few seconds." "Kisuk? Urahara Kisuk?" Masaki questioned. "Blonde, wears clogs and a bucket hat." Yuruchi nodded. "That's him." Masaki sighed in relief, her tenseness fading. "I'm sorry for being so standoffish. I thought you might be working for the ones who kidnapped me." "No problem," Rukia responded easily. "I'd be worried too." They waited several more seconds, and then up to a minute, but no portal opened, and all of the Shinigami kept their senses open. There was no sign at all of any interdimensional portal, even where they'd first come in. Yuruchi looked troubled. That's not good. Either this transponder is a dud, which I doubt since Kisuke made it, or Kisuke and Tessai both must have had to leave the shop. Well, it's too dangerous to stay here for the Kushinada to eat us, Hitsugaya pointed out. We should take the time to go join up with Ichigo, Renji suggested. Who knows, maybe the portal opened on a different level of hell this time. Worth looking into, Yuruchi agreed. Alright, Kurosaki-san, we need to move quickly. Hop on my back, we'll be going at high speed. Masaki nodded and climbed onto her back, wrapping her arms around Yuruchi's neck as gently as possible to give her room to breathe while still being firm enough to stay on. A few moments later, they began hurrying to find a dead end to jump down through to the next level of hell. Ichigo emerged through the bottom of the ocean to find himself landing on what seemed to be a volcanic area. It was extremely rocky, with yellow lava that oozed constantly from several pools. How much further? Their base is on the next level, so not long now, assuming that Shuran hasn't found himself any other hired help. Kakudo answered lowly. We should hurry, your sisters won't last much longer. Nodding, Ichigo followed the Togabido, Soi Fon silently a few steps behind. Why are you aiding us, Kakudo? Soi Fon asked. You are a Togabido, med to hell for sins performed in life. If you were an honorable person, then you wouldn't be here in hell, so what personal motive do you have? Kakudo sighed. It's true, I am a Togabido. I did perform sins in life, but what you don't know is that I had a sister once. I'm in hell because I avenged her. Ichigo blinked. What? Kakudo gave a bitter laugh, stopping and turning around. You know perfectly well what, Ichigo. Wouldn't you do the same if your sisters were killed? I slaughtered her murderers to the last, even when they begged for mercy. Mercy, he scoffed. I had no mercy for those who killed my family. That was the sin that made me, Ichigo. I'm in here because I did what any other person would do, because I felt what any other person would feel. And you would do it too, I can see it in your eyes, that smoldering fire that rages in your soul, lusting for vengeance against Shuran and the others for taking your sisters. You'd smite them down and take brutal satisfaction in every second of it. His voice had grown more and more fanatical by the second, as though he were reliving the sin with a smile on his face. Ichigo was silent, he couldn't deny it. Hell, it could be argued that he'd already done just that against Aizen after the traitor had held his mother hostage. Soi Fon scoffed, though inwardly a bit chilled by Kurosaki's lack of rebuttal. You should have left it to your justice system. Shut up, Ichigo snarled. You don't know what you're talking about. You have the power and authority to take lives as you please, assassin. For us petty mortals, no one knows what they're capable of doing until they're confronted with it. Kakudo found in his darkest moment that inside him is a vengeful killer that he let out to avenge his sister. And you already know what I'm capable of if pushed too far. And now you see the final result of that, Soi Fon rebutted, gesturing at Kakudo. Continue like this and you too will be doomed to hell upon your death. I will ascend to the heights of heaven, or descend to the pits of hell, Ichigo pointedly repeated the heartfelt vow that had led him to resurrection. Angel or demon, those titles mean nothing to me, as long as I can fulfill my desire. Soi Fon shivered, her mind seeing Ichigo's resurrection superimposed over him, and vaguely hearing the roar it had let loose upon its birth. My desire has always been to protect, but while I do not enjoy killing, I will do whatever it takes, the Vizard continued, not noticing Soi Fon's reaction. And should a loved one die, I will wreak unholy vengeance upon the perpetrators. You understand, Kakudo breathed, staring at Ichigo with a mixture of wonder, relief. Is that hope? Ichigo thought, meeting the Togabido's eyes. Visibly shaking himself, Kakudo reassumed his previous countenance. In any case, I'm helping in memory of my sister, because seeing you try so hard to save them. He trailed off, but both Soi Fon and Ichigo knew what had been left unsaid. We should get going. They began walking again. Ichigo, Kakudo murmured. If you can, when we're done. I'll free you from hell, Kakudo, Ichigo promised under his breath, just loud enough for the Togabido to hear, but too soft for Soi Fon to catch. I'm sure your sister misses you, and it's our duty as big brothers to protect them. Thanks. It was only a few minutes later that they emerged in the fourth level of hell, where Ichigo could see an empty desert as far as the eye could see, with a single, solitary structure in the distance. Soi Fon frowned as she stood upon. The sand, the way it shifted was similar but unlike the way sand would move in a desert. The grains beneath her feet did not feel right at all, it was not sand at all, something different. A tiny sniff of the air gave another hint that tickled at Soi Fon's comprehension, but she couldn't place it. Togabido. What are we standing on? Wind whipped around, churning the sand for a moment, and Kakudo sighed before turning to address the Shinigami. Bones. The sand here is made up of the crushed bones of all the Togabido who have lost all hope and given up on their afterlife here in hell. They turn to ash after being eaten for the last time by the Kushinada, and their skeletons are tossed down here to decompose. Be careful not to breathe too much of it in, I've heard that the sand seeks to drag down anyone who steps onto this level of hell. Now come on, Shuran's hideout is just over there, let's finish this. Hyori growled behind her mask as her opponent, whom she was sharing with Shinji, once again got up and regenerated instantly with his damnable tentacles. The Togabido had long since discarded their black cloaks and revealed their true garb, and Gunjo was a tall, pale man with his entire upper head from the bridge of his nose up covered in gray bandages, though neck-length dark hair dangled freely from the back of his head. Twin scars ran from the bottom of the bandages down his cheeks, all the way to either side of his chin. Gunjo had revealed that he was able to use at least 7 tentacles simultaneously, and could heal them extremely rapidly, which was the only reason Hyori hadn't just cut him in half already. Shinji was helping where he could with Sakan aid, but Gunjo's apparent blindness must have gifted him with extraordinary powers of Ryatsu perception similar to Tozen Kan-aim, as he was very rarely fooled by the reversed world effect. As a result, Shinji was looking for an opportunity to use Hyori's finisher, but it was taking a long time. Hurry up, you useless baka. Hyori criticized Shinji without any real rancor, dodging another very pointed tentacle strike that had been aimed to pierce her head and using Kubikiri Orochi to chop another one off as it attempted a follow-up strike. You're clear, Hyori. Shinji called out. About DMN time. Taking only a moment to open her mouth and gather her energy, she fired a zero at the troublesome BSTRD. Hyori was extremely gratified to see the blast take out the entire left side of Gunjo's body, save his leg. She was about to move the zero to finish Gunjo off, but then she gasped in pain, her zero fizzling out as she froze. There was a tentacle piercing her chest, right at her collarbone. And then the tentacle retracted, and agony ripped up her nerves to assault her brain. She fell to the ground, her vision fading, the sound of Shinji's desperate voice quieting, the stone beneath her feeling more and more comfortable. Don't you dare. Hyori opened her eyes to find herself in her inner world. Around her were the foggy marshlands that her Zanpakuto spirit resided in, with several pools of water barely visible in the mist. The water, she knew, created paths in the tall, wet grass, the paths winding their way towards where Hyori knew Kubikiri Orochi liked to spend time. Kubikiri Orochi was nowhere in sight, but it was impossible not to notice the other resident of this world, as she was standing right in front of her. Hollow. Don't you dare FNG give up, Hyori, the bleached white version of herself demanded heatedly, getting straight into Hyori's face. You don't get to give up. Well, what exactly do you expect me to do, huh? Hyori yelled back. I can't do much with a freaking hole in my chest. Ah, but I can, you idiot. Hollows have holes, remember, or have you decided to forget everything you learned while you were a mere Shinigami? Hyori's inner hollow reminded rudely. Give me control or we'll both die. Hyori scoffed, but had to admit that she had a point. Fine. The hollow side of Hyori blinked, taken aback by the seemingly easy acceptance. What? You're not going to fight me, to demand me to do what I can and then give back control. You're part of me, Hollow, and I know I can at least trust in your wish for survival, Hyori pointed out. But I'll be watching, and the instant you do something I have issues with, I'll drag you back here screaming and take control again. Besides, I was thinking we should start working together more often anyway. The Hollow looked at her suspiciously, but slowly nodded in assent. Whatever. We can talk about that when we live. Better get going then, Hyori taunted. Or are you scared? Hyori's inner Hollow cackled with a fierce grin and eyes that lusted for battle. Me, scared? Never. Outside, everyone paused in their battles as they felt a very familiar pulse of Ryatsu. Shinji had scooped up Hyori and was about to dash to Lisa, who knew the most healing Kido of all the Vizard outside Hachi, but then he froze as he felt the sinister feeling of Hollow Ryatsu running across and through his comrade's body. Hyori's skin paled considerably, and the hole in her chest grew a little larger, stabilizing and no longer bleeding as the lower half of her mask began to crumble, leaving only the part covering her forehead and around her left eye. Red diamond markings were emblazoned all across the mask fragment, with the large horn curving upwards remaining dead center in the middle. Hyori's clothes shifted and changed as well, keeping the overall theme of red and white, but now they seemed like an extension of the mask markings, as lily-white diamonds ran down the sleeves of her crimson-red coat, as well as down each leg of her pants. Finally, she opened her eyes and Shinji noted that her eyes had the black scara of hollowification just like Ichigo, with her usual brown as the iris. Oi, let go, the Hollow that had taken Hyori's body demanded. She shoved her way out and dusted herself off. She stretched Hyori's arms and back, and several loud, almost painful to hear cracks could be heard as she grew accustomed to the body. Shinji wasn't sure whether he wanted to throttle Hyori, or congratulate her. It was obvious her inner Hollow had taken over much like Ichigo's had, and given that she hadn't completely hollowified during the switch Hyori hadn't fought it. Which means that it's not permanent. Which means that Hyori didn't get eaten. So, what's your name? He asked the Hollow casually, not betraying the nervous excitement that he felt so keenly. Had. Hyori gained what she needed for resurrection. Nodded med clue. I'll figure it out later, but right now we've got, bigger. Hyori's Hollow suddenly clutched her head, crouching down as though she were in incredible mental pain. Another pulse came from her body, and Kobikiri Orochi jumped into her hand from several yards away. But then, she let loose a primal scream, and it promptly melted into the white goo that had hollowified them all to begin with a century ago, and splashed her straight in the face. Hyori's mask completely regenerated and then grew even further, wrapping completely around her head, her spiky pigtails shifting upwards to look like additional horns for her mask. Her coat and pants swiftly turned a darker crimson color but otherwise remained unchanged, but now from her knees and elbows she had a single short ivory blade-like protrusion each, all of them aiming down at a sharp angle. Her nails grew longer, sharper, and Shinji noticed that it seemed like her entire body had gained some extra muscle mass. When the Hollow Hyori had become let loose a scream of challenge to the sky, Shinji knew exactly what to say about the situation. Well, sheet. Yep, Hyori just went through resurrection. Hell had the effect on her very quickly. She'd been wearing the mask for a while now, and the switch from Vizard to Arankar just triggered the next jump, but since neither was prepared for it, no one's in control. I added some details to Hell that weren't in the movie. I figured it would actually add to the scenery, and explain why we didn't see anyone outside the first level. Soi Fon's being paranoid and overly analytical again, but then again that's what she does. She's an assassin. Chapter 46, Damnation. Shinji leapt back, narrowly dodging being skewered on one of Hyori's bone-like blades jutting from her body. This doesn't make sense. Her inner Hollow took over without issue. But then it looked like even Hyori's Hollow was somehow forced into resurrection. And it lost control in the process. Does Hell have some sort of special effect on Shinigami Hollow hybrids? Or is this a consequence of crossing the line between Vizard and Arankar? Shinji spun Sakanade rapidly, spreading the scent that was the key to his Zanpakudo's effect. It seemed to work. Hyori was now attacking in the opposite direction of where Shinji was, which was enough to buy him some time. Hollows and Arrancar are crippled by damaging the mask. Since Hyori's hollow is theoretically the dominant presence, she's an Arrancar right now, and not a Vizard. So breaking the mask could be disastrous. Wish Hachi was with us, he'd figure out a good Bakudo to keep her occupied. Shinji shook his head, dodging out of the way of one of Hyori's attacks. She'd actually chosen the right image that time. Only choice is to hurt her bad enough to drop out of Resurrection, but not bad enough to kill her, and hope she doesn't have high-speed regeneration to keep her up and fighting. But that'll be tough with just Shirkai. Do I dare use the mask? Hyori's mouth opened wide, and a Zero charged for only a scant moment before Shinji found himself flashing through the air, trying to evade the deadly beam as she spun around, apparently having decided that if she couldn't guess right, she'd just hit everything at once. That made Shinji's mind up for him. She's too strong, and right now she's too dangerous to the others. Mask it is. Passing a hand over his face and wordlessly pulling on the mask of the hollow he might have been and may yet be, Shinji spun Sakane twice more before using Shuanpa to appear directly below and behind Hyori. As was so predictable, Hyori swiped upwards at where his mirror image was in her sight. But by the time Hyori's berserk self could figure out what had happened, Shinji was ready. From his extended fist, he unleashed an incredibly wide, thin, powerful Zero that rocketed into Hyori's back. The transformed Vizard let loose a scream of pain and rage as the Zero sliced into her back and moved her high into the sky, not wounding her too deeply but enough to be extremely painful. With any luck, it would buy Shinji a little time to think of a good enough plan to knock some sense back into Hyori or her hollow. Suddenly, Shinji's head and heart thrummed with power as he felt his inner hollow come to the surface. Oi, Shinji! Let me out! Why? I'm doing just fine. Can't you sense it, idiot? Hyori's not the only one who's gone full hollow. As if Shinji's hollow's words were the trigger, Shinji suddenly felt each of his friends racing towards him with full hollow Ryatsu blazing. Once again, he was the last one to transform, just like when they'd first been hollowified by Aizen. They're not fighting each other, Shinji noted vaguely as he narrowly evaded 3 Zero beams fired at him from a distance. Just me. They must have finished their opponents, and now see me as the only one not like them. You should have realized by now, Shinji. The air in hell, it calls to us, the inner hollow explained. It gives us such strength. The only reason I haven't forcibly taken over is that I could see that Hyori's hollow lost control as well. Much as I hate it, you're the voice of reason. As long as you're in control, we can stay sane. But there's no point being sane if you're gonna die. So budge over, and let me in. Shinji was reluctant, but his hollow had a point. If there was any goal they shared, it was survival, and the inner hollow made sense. Plus, Ichigo had said something about trusting their hollow and working together. If there was ever a time to trust each other, now was it. Alright, you're in. Shinji's hollow sent him an impression of a grim, toothy smile. Hang on then, this is gonna be rough. He reached up, and Shinji didn't fight his hollow's presence as it began to take over. Ichigo, Soi Fon and Kakudo arrived at where Shuran's base was, and Ichigo blinked upon seeing it. It was a pit of yellow-orange lava, surrounded by pillars. It looked very ceremonial, and Ichigo had the distinct feeling that he was going to be unpleasantly surprised by it in the near future. In the middle, hanging above the lava, was a small cage with both of his sisters. Ichigo. Ichi and I. Welcome, Kurosaki Ichigo, Shuran greeted him from his perch atop one of the pillars, ignoring the twins. I knew, of course, that you would not come alone. Not after your pitiful performance last time. Give them back. Ichigo demanded. After you release me from hell, they're free to go, Shuran replied easily, gesturing towards the cage. Nonchalantly. Fair trade, isn't it? Oh, and don't bother trying to double-cross me. I anticipated you bringing your friends along, and I do have precautions in place. Ichigo clenched his fists. Ichigo, we must act quickly, Kakudo whispered from behind him. Your sisters have been in here for a while now, and they will succumb to hell soon. Like I needed more reminding. But before Ichigo could decide, Soi Fon blurred out of sight and reappeared behind Shuran, Suzumabachi released and ready on her finger, lunging for the first of 2 hits that would guarantee a kill. But Shuran spun around and dodged, apparently having expected that. "You're rather impulsive," he commented amusedly. "But I suppose if that's your decision." He smirked. Garagai, Taikon, Gunjo. The lava suddenly surged upwards and outwards before pulling back, revealing 3 vaguely human shapes that the lava dripped off of. Ichigo's eyes went wide as he saw the enemies that his Vizard companions had stayed back to delay. "That can't be!" Kakudo exclaimed. "You can't have that much power, to affect others' regeneration cycle. It's based on the amount of negative emotion you have, how can you be able to interfere with hell itself?" Shuran merely smirked. "Take care of them, but leave Kurosaki Ichigo for me." Ichigo grit his teeth, drawing his Zanpakudo. "Tear the sky asunder, Zangetsu." As the sword once more shape-shifted into the familiar cleaver, Ichigo brought it forward to his oft-assumed position, black and red Ryatsu emanating in wisps from his body. Now is not the time to hold back. "Yuzu, Karen, hang on. I'm coming for you." Bankai. Soi Fon landed next to him and Kakudo a moment later, after the dust kicked up from Ichigo's release of Bankai settled. "I'll take the blob and the giant," Soi Fon assumed. "Togabido, take out the tentacle user." "Roger that," Kakudo muttered, disgruntled at how the Shinigami had just taken command, but it was hardly the time to argue over such things. "Ichigo, I'll try to create an opening, you save your sisters." Ichigo gave him a short nod, eyes narrow and focused on the enemies. Letting loose a fierce battle cry, he and Kakudo leapt forward at high speed towards their respective targets. Shuran merely smirked as he snapped his fingers and created a blade of seemingly solid fire, slamming it against Tensa Zangetsu to deflect Ichigo's initial attack. Not easily deterred, Ichigo used Shunpa to flicker behind Shuran and slashed at his foe again, only this time to be evaded. Faster and faster he went, being blocked or dodged every time. "Can't you see, Ichigo, it's useless?" Shuran crowed. Ichigo screamed in frustration, and suddenly his Jillian mask materialized without being summoned. Deciding to take advantage of the power upgrade and question it later, he threw his left hand forward and fired a blindingly red zero. Shuran moved both his hands in front of him and began releasing so much fire that for a moment, Ichigo wondered if he and Ryujin Jaka knew each other. But while these flames weren't nearly so hot, they served their purpose of weakening the zero enough so that by the time it struck Shuran, it did no practical damage. Meanwhile, Soi Fon was having a tough enough time as it was. The short and disgustingly fat one, Taikon, was deceptively fast and acrobatic for his stature. While not so fast as to give her a hard time on his own, Taikon also worked well with the giant, Garagai, who fired his enormous fists at her at opportune moments. Soi Fon had thought to finish Garagai quickly by using his own attack against him. If he wanted to send pieces of himself at her, she would just strike twice with Suzumabachi and kill him. That would also open up the possibility of ending Taikon without interruption. All in all, Soi Fon had thought it a decent plan on short notice. The problem was that Garagai was also protected by Taikon. Every time Soi Fon was in a position to stab at Garagai's hand, Taikon tended to fire his purple explosive Ryatsu missiles from a kissing movement, forcing her to dodge out of the way. Perhaps a change in priorities is prudent. Bakudo 9, Geki. Soi Fon barked, making a slashing movement with her left hand in Garagai's general direction. She almost smiled when she saw the giant's body freeze and glow with a red light, and then turned her undivided attention towards the suddenly apprehensive Taikon. Lunging at him with the speed of Shunpa, she reached out with her right arm to stab him right in his engorged stomach, but when he suddenly smirked and another mouth appeared and opened there, Soi Fon abruptly had to halt or else risk be eaten. Alright, physical attacks are extremely risky. Perhaps Kido will be more effective. Hearing the low whistle of air being forced away quickly by a large object, Soi Fon instinctively flickered away just in time to avoid being crushed into a pulp from Garagai's giant fist coming from above. Reappearing a distance away, she frowned pensively, calculating her next move carefully. This will be tricky. At the same time, Kakudo was dodging and weaving through hordes of tentacles, slicing them off where he could with his wicked onyx blade. Unfortunately, the appendages had a bad tendency of regenerating extremely quickly, making it difficult for Kakudo to get close to Gunjo. Feeling Ichigo's Ryatsu skyrocket into hollowification, Kakudo glanced to the side just long enough to see Ichigo charge a Zero in Shuran's direction. That would be so useful right about now. Then again. Suddenly inspired, Kakudo hurled his blade at his opponent through the mass of tentacles. Predictably, Gunjo dodged to the side and resumed his attack, but Kakudo smirked. Materializing the hellbinding chains that he'd attached to his sword a long time ago, Kakudo channeled some of his own Ryatsu and yanked hard, while at the same time narrowly dodging the latest onslaught of tentacles. Kakudo was gratified to feel his blade connect, could not help but smirk victoriously when he saw that not only had he managed to get Gunjo, but he'd actually managed to cut off the BSTRD's head. It was a lucky shot, he knew, but sometimes that's all one needed. Now that was done, Kakudo ran as quickly as he could towards Ichigo's sisters. They can't have long left. Kakudo. Karen gasped as he stood underneath the cage. Please hurry, Yuzu's unconscious and I can't wake her up. Got it. Leaping up towards the cage and utilizing the airwalk technique, Kakudo gathered his strength and sliced through the bars in 2 places. Sheathing his sword, he reached to take Yuzu under his arm when he suddenly felt a rush of fire coming towards them. Unable to move for fear that Ichigo's sisters would be killed, Kakudo had no choice but to stand and bear it. He grit his teeth in pain as fire scorched his back, but luckily the fire was cut off quickly. A little more shakily, Kakudo grabbed both twins and leapt down to safety behind one of the stone pillars. Setting them down, Kakudo reached out with his power and opened a portal to the living world. Or tried to. He was being blocked. Putting on a brave smile for the ones Ichigo had come to save, Kakudo tried to reassure them. Alright, plan A didn't work, but don't worry, we'll get you out of here. What's plan B? Karen demanded. Plan B is to kill the ones who kidnapped you, wait for your brother's friends to rejoin us, and use their signal to get our friends in the living world to bail us out, Kakudo made up on the spot. I'm going to stay here and make sure you don't get hit by any stray shots, so sit tight. Your big brother'll be done soon. Yuruchi cursed as she raced alongside Rukia, Renji, and Hitsugaya down through the 2nd level of hell with Masaki on her back. The Vizard had all hollowified and were chasing them, sending horrifyingly powerful Zeros at them, or attempting to intercept and slash at them. None of them seemed to have a Zanpakudo, so there was at least some small blessing there. Sit upon the frozen heavens, Hyrinmaru. Hitsugaya called out, before promptly using his Shurkai to send a few ice dragons at his hollowified comrades. Dance, Sodi no Shirayuki. Some no Mai, Tsukishiro. Rukia intoned, creating a pair of ice pillars that temporarily encased 2 or 3 of the Vizard. She was too busy running to look for details. She heard the pillars shatter with the terrifying screams of challenge, and pushed more Ryatsu into her legs. We've got to get down to the next level. Renji yelled. Well, we went down on the last level, maybe we have to head down again. Hitsugaya suggested. It was as good a thought as any, Yuruchi figured. Hold your breath, she ordered Masaki, before diving beneath the waves, followed shortly thereafter by her companions. Sure enough, after a few painful seconds of wondering if they'd made mistake and would accidentally drown Masaki in the process of rescuing her, they broke through to the next level, but she couldn't sense Ichigo, Soi Fon or Kakudo here either. Activating the beacon on her wrist again, Yuruchi spent a moment extending her spiritual sense, looking for a portal. Not sensing any, she sighed. Still no good. Let's keep going. Down again, she ordered, and not a moment too soon. The second they moved, a very powerful Zero obliterated the spot they'd been standing. The Vizard had followed them. It was only a short distance down this time, and the clash of combat was easily visible even from a distance. Soi Fon was fighting a short, ugly, hideously obese man who seemed absurdly light on his feet, and a huge muscle-bound giant. Kakudo appeared to be guarding the girls. But Ichigo. Rukia shivered as she continued to run towards the battle. His hollowified Ryatsu practically exuded desperation and haste. But he hasn't used resurrection. Her thoughts were abruptly interrupted when a Zero passed inches by her head. Shuanping forward and up, Rukia twisted around in midair and brought Sodi no Shirayuki to her shoulder, water in the air freezing into ice crystals and rising around her as she prepared her technique. Tsugi no Mai, Hakuren. A huge wave of ice rushed into the Vizard, and when the Ryatsu cleared, Rukia was extremely gratified to realize that she'd managed to entrap them all in an enormous block of near-opaque ice. But she could sense it would last only seconds, but there was someone who could extend that time a little. Hitsugaya Taicho. On it. Bankai. With a burst of icy Ryatsu, the diminutive Taicho emerged in his Bankai form, ready to use his ice powers to their fullest. Between him and Rukia, their Ryatsu was lowering the temperature of the air drastically. Flapping his ice wings, Hitsugaya lunged towards the rapidly cracking ice and moved Daiguren Hyorinmaru into it. Ryusenka. The air abruptly went from merely cold to downright freezing as from the point of impact even more ice emerged from the point of impact and wrapped around the entire frozen structure, further entrapping the hollowified Vizard. One thing left to do, and that's keep them out of the fight as long as possible. San no Mai, Shirafun, Rukia intoned. As Sodi no Shirayuki absorbed the ice particles around Rukia and reforged itself, the air to the Kuchiki gently pushed the tip of her Zanpakuto into the desert beneath her. A thin trail of ice crackled into existence across the sand, connecting Rukia to the prison that she and Hitsugaya had trapped the Vizard in. Go, I'll maintain this until you get back. I'll stick around, just in case any more Togabido turn up, Renji volunteered, concerned. You too sure? Yuruchi asked. I'm sure. Go help Ichigo. Rukia ordered. Humans can't last long here, remember. Ichigo's sisters probably don't have long left, and we can't afford to waste any time. I'll keep the Vizard here. Now go. Hitsugaya nodded shortly, a glimmer of respect flickering in his eyes as he turned away from her and Shunpaed away. Yuruchi followed suit. As soon as they left, Rukia heaved a sigh and sat down. Shirafun always takes so much out of me. I hope they don't take too long. Have faith in them, Rukia, Sodi no Shirayuki advised. They are strong. I know. I'm just worried about being trapped here. We don't know the spell to open the portal, and Urahara is either not receiving our signal, or is being attacked. The ice structure cracked a little, and Rukia channeled more freezing energy into it. She knew she was lucky that Hitsugaya Taicho had been there to increase the power and reinforce her prison. Otherwise, the Vizard would surely have escaped by now. Though she wondered why none of them had thought of using Zero thus far to break out. Rukia blinked and peered deeper into the ice. There was something strange going on, that was certain. None of them had been hit in any way by the Vizard's hollow selves. Not even a scratch had been rendered. The improbability of that. I'm not even Fukutecho level, and they are Taicho and Fukutecho level before hollowification. And I shouldn't be able to hold them like this, unless they're not using their full strength. But they seem berserk. Rukia shook her head. Something just did. Not add up, but she had no idea what it could be. Renji's thoughts were far simpler. He was in full-on combat mode, and was warily watching and listening for any sign the Vizard were breaking out, or if a Togabido was coming their way. Hitsugaya and Yuruchi materialized with Masaki right next to Kakudo and the twins, gently but quickly shrugging Ichigo's mother off of her. Once more raising her wrist, Yuruchi pushed the button 3 times quickly. When nothing happened yet again, she sighed in frustration. What's wrong? Kakudo asked. I'm not getting through, Yuruchi related. I've been sending the signal, but we haven't felt any portals open. Can you get one open? The Togabido shook his head negatively. I've already tried a few times. Someone or something has closed off hell from the other dimensions. DMN it, Hitsugaya cursed. There's got to be another way out. I might have better luck on one of the higher levels of hell, Kakudo suggested, though his tone said quite clearly that he didn't think that would be the case. If that fails, well, we could break down the door, so to speak. What? Destroy the gates of hell. They regenerate, so it wouldn't be permanent, but we could get an opening long enough for us to get through, Kakudo offered. Yuruchi blinked. Is there even enough power to destroy those gates? She asked skeptically. If anyone has enough power, it's Ichigo, Kakudo stated simply. And that, the goddess of Flash could not refute. All right. Let's take care of the last of the enemies here, so we can get out of here. Go. I need to stay here to protect them, but you need to hurry, the bandaged man added. Look at the girls. Yuruchi did so, and frowned. Yuzu appeared unconscious, and breathing haggardly. Both Masaki and Karen were pale and weakly hugging. The air of hell is lethal to everyone not of hell themselves, Kakudo explained. People with more Ryatsu are better protected, but as you can see, Ichigo's family doesn't have long until they die and are dead to hell themselves. Yuruchi flickered away without another word, not caring as Hitsugaya volunteered to help protect the girls. Appearing behind the fat tub of lard that Soi Fon was fighting, Yuruchi was in no mood to play. Shunko. What the? Taikon was hit by an incredibly powerful kick and went flying horizontally across the desert, just before Yuruchi proved her status as goddess of Shuranpa by flickering behind him and calmly, brutally swinging her Kido-enhanced arm into and through his fat neck, instantly decapitating him and sending his head and body rocketing in different directions across the sands. A wordless blast of purple Kido later, even those were incinerated. Soi Fon took instant advantage of the new opportunity and within seconds, Garagai had been dispatched as well. There was not even a trace of his body remaining. Yuruchi-sama. Her old Taicho flickered next to her, without a trace of a smile. This was not the happy woman who loved to mess with her subordinates. This was the merciless leader of the Onmitsukido, the ultimate assassin. Come, Soi Fon. Without hesitation, Soi Fon nodded. Hi. Mere moments later, they were just outside the range of Ichigo's fight with Shuran. Ichigo. Yuruchi called out sharply. Yuruchi. Is everyone okay? Ichigo demanded, blasting away another powerful burst of flame with Tensa Zangetsu. Yuruchi materialized next to Ichigo as Shuran leapt back, apparently trying to think of a better tactic. We found your mother, and your sisters are out of the cage, but Kisuke isn't responding to the signal, and Kakudo can't open a portal to the living world due to some sort of interference. We need you to blast open the gates of hell up on the top level, and quickly. Your family won't last much longer here in hell, so we'll need to move quickly. Ichigo growled, a sound that made Soi Fon shiver as the hollowification made his voice even more chilling. Small problem. This BSTRD can resurrect Togabido from that pool. We leave him alone, he brings back everyone on his side, and then we have to fight them all over again. True, but right now I have other plans, Shuran cackled from a distance away. Can't you feel it? Can't you hear it? The Kushinada are coming. And suddenly, Ichigo could feel it, the enormous combined Ryatsu of several, dozens, hundreds. No way, thousands of them. They were starting to float down from the sky, climb up from the sands, emerge from the far-off cliffs, they were everywhere, as far as the eye could see. They can sense you, Kurosaki Ichigo. They know you have the power to shatter the bindings holding us to this wretched plane. Shuran cried. And they will eat everyone. If you will not free us, then you and your family will join us in hell. He rushed at Ichigo, who once more raised Tensa Zangetsu to slash against Shuran with a Getsuga-enhanced strike. It shattered Shuran's flame sword and landed a glancing blow to his shoulder, but Shuran didn't seem to care. With his other hand, he suddenly had an orb of fire ready, which Shuran promptly moved into Ichigo. The sphere exploded on impact, and Ichigo grunted in pain as he was sent flying up into the air, until he got his bearings and used the airwalk technique to launch himself back at Shuran. Getsuga Tensho. Shuran unleashed a torrent of flames that only just redirected the Getsuga to his side. The energy blast promptly cut through half a dozen Kushinada. Ichigo blinked as he suddenly felt hundreds of eyes focus on him. Well, shit. Ichigo. Karen screamed out. Ichigo almost gave himself whiplash as he twisted to turn towards the sound. Hitsugaya was having a rough time, sending waves of ice daggers, firing ice dragons, and otherwise just doing his best to keep himself and his charges alive. Kakudo was fighting 4 Kushinada who were apparently targeting him, and he was losing ground quickly. Suddenly, Kakudo's chains were materialized and gripped by 2 of the Kushinada, and he was jerked up into the air, a 3rd Kushinada reaching with its enormous hand to grab him. Heido 63, Raikoho. Yuruchi bellowed, sending lightning crashing down upon the Kushinada, giving Kakudo just enough time to regain his balance and swipe down with his obsidian blade, cutting its head in half. But it had been enough to get Kakudo away from Ichigo's family, and Hitsugaya was suddenly cut off from being able to protect them, surrounded by several more Kushinada. No! Masaki cried out, leaping in front of her twin children. You will not have them. Ichigo's eyes widened to their limits, and then shock gave way to action. In that moment, all other priorities were non-existent. He savagely ripped his Ajucha's mask into existence, flickering into Shuranpa, only to be attacked by Shuran. Despite being engulfed in flames, Ichigo was hardly aware of Shuran's existence even as he sent the Togabido, who had attempted to blindside him through the fire, flying with a single powerful slide of Tensa Zangetsu. The flames vanished, but Ichigo paid it no mind as he made his way to Masaki as fast he could. He didn't notice that his mask was growing over his head, or that his hair was getting steadily longer, or that at his neck and wrists he now sported crimson tufts of hair. Several Kushinada managed to get between him and the one that held his mother, but Ichigo was beyond all rationality. Charging a Siro in his horns as his Shunpa gave way to Sonido, Ichigo let loose a powerful blast that obliterated every Kushinada in front of him, even the one that held his mother. The hand that had gripped her was starting to fall, but Ichigo sliced off the fingers before Masaki could blink, freeing her. Masaki blinked and looked up at her son. She'd suddenly been shifted to beneath his left arm, as his right was holding his Zanpakudo. But she was not prepared to see the mask of a hollow on her darling Ichigo's face. If she did not know that her son was in there, Masaki knew she would be terrified. Ichigo! Ichigo screamed out a wordless challenge loud enough to echo in the vast desert of hell, all reason and rationality gone, given way to the instinctual power he'd drawn on. Not far away, Rukia gasped as suddenly the ice that she'd been maintaining began to glow with a terrible light, and then it began to crack rapidly. No! She shunted more and more Ryatsu into preserving the ice, but to no avail. With a unified scream, the Vizard shattered the icy prison they'd been in. Sheet! Renji swore and he and Rukia fell into defensive stances, but the various hollowified Vizard did not seem to be interested in them. Instead, all of them vanished away at once in a burst of sonido. Soi Fon watched in silent terror as she watched Kurosaki Ichigo charge the trademark hollow attack, and then a Siro more powerful than any she had ever conceived of erupted, disintegrating heads, arms, entire Kushinada in front of him as a pulse of Ryatsu blew the rest of them backwards. Soi Fon could barely breathe, let alone stand even from the distance she had put between them, and watched in horror as Kurosaki swung Tensa Zangetsu once, slaughtering hundreds more Kushinada in the direction of his swing as an enormous Getsuga Tensho ripped through them. Purple blood sprayed across the landscape, painting the sands of the desert with the remains of the Kushinada. And then the rest of the Vizard suddenly appeared a short distance behind Ichigo but in front of a shocked and terrified Karen, standing in a line. Again, Ichigo shrieked his rage. But it seemed that the wordless vocalization had meaning, as all 7 of his Vizard companions took stances and began charging Siro. The hollow that Ichigo had become lowered his horns and began charging one himself. And all 8 of them fired with a unified bestial scream against the Kushinada army. Another Zero rocketed from Ichigo's horns, this one a sustained beam of annihilation that Kurosaki moved with his head, utterly destroying countless more of the bearers of Hell's will. Fire and explosions rocked the wasteland as waves of Kushinada ceased to be under the might of such power. Again, Ichigo screamed and they let loose a second volley, eradicating hundreds more. Kakudo, Hitsugaya, Rukia and Renji rejoined Yuruchi and Soi Fon in the air above the scene, all but the Togabido watching in stark horror of the situation. Ichigo had completely hollowified again, and once more he was no longer in control. His family was dying every second, and the 2 plans they'd had for escaping had failed. Urahara was unable to reach them, and Kakudo could not make a portal out. But while the others were horrified, Kakudo was warring with himself. The Zero of 8 very powerful Vizard would surely be more than sufficient to break his chains. But if he took the opportunity to be free from hell, then there was no guarantee that he'd be able to open a portal out if whatever was interfering with his attempts was cancelled. Who knew what would happen? It's not like anyone's actually escaped hell before. I might just be reincarnated immediately after the chains are gone. I might ascend to Soul Society. Or hell might try to rechain me. Who knows? All Kakudo knew was that he wanted freedom, but he also wanted to help Ichigo to save his family when Kakudo himself had failed. A loud tremor on the earth below and in the cliff that he and Ichigo had climbed down attracted Kakudo's attention, just before his eyes opened wide in shock. He could sense the living world. "Oh Kami-sama!" Kakudo uttered, getting everyone else's attention. "The gates. They're open." And that's it for this chapter. I know, it's a little short. Ichigo is able to command the Vizard because he's an Ajuchas and the Vizard are Jillian or lower, but they've all gone berserk and are attacking the Kushinada. Now Ichigo's family, save Ishin, are together. Masaki and Karen are witnessing the true brutality and horror of Ichigo's resurrection, while the others are seeing just what kind of power Ichigo's army has access to. Chapter 47, Breaking Barriers. This has not been a good day, Urahara Kisuke privately admitted to himself as he carefully kept his guard up in the mist he was trapped in. The watch on his wrist beeped 5 times in quick succession once again, and the former assassin allowed himself a sigh. "I know, Yuruchi. Sorry I'm late. Again. Why is it that everything happens all at once, rather than in reasonable chunks?" Not even an hour ago, Urahara had sent Ichigo and his team to hell in order to rescue Ichigo's family. But mere minutes later, a veritable army of hollows had suddenly emerged in Karakura, forcing Urahara to deploy all available fighters, namely himself, Tensai, and Hachi. Yururu and Jinta had been left at home, while strong, they were still children and Urahara would never bring children into this kind of fight if it could be avoided. The strangest part though, was that the hollows seemed to be out for 3 people in particular, a pair of Shinigami and a little girl dressed in colorful, ornate, very expensive-looking robes. The girl appeared to be their charge, if the way the Shinigami had promptly abandoned the fight while yelling about getting to safe house. A noble then. "I hate getting into political matters," Urahara grumbled. And then while they had been busy taking out the hollows, while they weren't very strong at all comparatively, they did have overwhelming numbers to work with, someone new had come along and blanketed the area in Ryatsu-flooded mist, making it far more difficult to Tensai and Hachi to deal with the hollows. They were Kid-O types through and through, and not well suited to fighting virtually blind. There was hollow Ryatsu everywhere, making it difficult for them to track with their spiritual sense, and neither wanted to accidentally cause casualties among the living humans. But the mist meant little to Urahara Kisuke, former assassin of the Onmitsukido. Mere mist meant nothing to someone who had been trained to kill without the use of any of their senses save spiritual. Closing his eyes, Urahara had been destroying hollows left and right before instinctually blocking a sword that seemed to be wielded by the mist itself. Surprising, a voice that echoed in the mist congratulated as dark shadows began to appear around Urahara, unknown to the exile. The sword itself wisped back into mist a moment later. You are quite at home here without your sight. Same to you, assassin, Urahara replied with a thin smile. Why are you targeting that noble girl, and why are you working with these hollows? That is not for you to know. Ah, confirmed. She is a noble, and he is working with them. But I already know so much, Urahara complained affably. You are after that little noble girl, who I presume came here to escape your employer with her 2 bodyguards. You or more likely your employer has some connection with hollows, perhaps a treat to entice them towards her. That means she's dangerous somehow, so probably an heir. Your sword, while similar to a zanpakudo, does not convey your spirit, nor does it have quite the right, shall we call it, flavor, of Ryatsu. It is artificial, yet it has powers very similar to that of a zanpakudo. That's practically unheard of, as it would give practically anyone the ability to become pseudo-shinigami, and possibly give existing shinigami a second set of abilities. That would make it almost certainly forbidden knowledge, so only true masters of weapons forging could have even known about the process, let alone properly forged your weapon. If my memory serves me correctly, then the Kasumiyaji are the only nobles primarily associated with specialty weapons manufacturing, the shopkeeper continued, musing aloud. That leads me to one of 2 conclusions: either you, or your employer, has or have had relations with the Kasumiyaji. Given all that, it's a reasonable guess that the little girl is the heir to the Kasumiyaji. There was a moment of silence. That's actually quite impressive, the unnamed assassin in the mist admitted. My sword is known as a bakodo, and it is indeed forged with forbidden techniques of the Kasumiyaji. So tell me, who are you, and why do you inhibit me? Me? I'm just the humble owner of a small shop that caters to the spiritual side of things, Urahara replied loftily. And while normally I don't involve myself in the matters of soul society. His voice lowered slightly as he began to smirk. We are not in soul society, and I would like this place still standing next week. What do you mean, shopkeeper? The attacker queried with a mocking lilt. You would be well advised to know Kurosaki Ichigo calls this place home, Urahara answered. Perhaps you've heard of him. Orange hair. Giant sword. Invaded Soul Society a few months ago to save a noble girl from execution. Killed Aizen, which not even Yamamoto Sotecho managed. Is the name ringing any bells yet? What does he have to do with anything? He went to war with against Soul Society for the sake of one noble girl he barely knew before. Can you tell me why he wouldn't again? There was silence for a moment. For all his reputation as the defender of Karakura, Kurosaki Ichigo certainly hasn't made an appearance despite all the hollows. He isn't here, is he? The voice asked shrewdly. After we all felt his Ryatsu at the Barine mansion, it suddenly vanished. I thought he had returned to the living world, but apparently for once it seems the rumors flying around about him have some substance behind them. Urahara swore under his breath. He knew where this was going. Kurosaki is currently in hell, rescuing his mother, the assassin guessed, before laughing assuredly. Even if he manages to escape from hell, he'll probably still go to war against Soul Society anyway for threatening his family. My actions here won't hurt that situation at all. In any case, I've wasted enough time here. So have I. Sorry, Urahara replied in a too calm voice, but I can't afford to play with you anymore today. Awaken, Beneheim. You're a Shinigami, the mist user exclaimed. No matter. My body does not physically exist in this mist unless I will it. You are mistaken. Your body is this mist until you consolidate yourself, Urahara corrected. Time to recompose yourself, or die. Heido 58, 10 Ran. The moderately powerful Heido, in the hands of Urahara, blasted the majority of the mist up and away from himself and towards the fray of various combat spells being used by the Kido masters Hachijin and Tessai. Urahara could see several bursts of Byakuya and Shikaho, with a few Raikoho tossed in as well. Suddenly from within the mist, a shadow emerged, and then a whole body materialized, with some mist still emerging from the sword it wielded in its right hand. The assassin dressed all in black, long-sleeve black shirt, black pants, black face mask that covered his nose and mouth. The only things not in black were the dark pink armor he wore on top of the shirt and his brown hair. He promptly flickered down to a short ways away from Urahara. "I shall have to remember that tactic in the future," the man complimented. "My name is Kuzu Ryu, assassin. May I have yours?" Urahara Kisuke, exile. Ryu nodded. "As I have no real strategy against someone who can counter the mist, I will retreat for now." And he shunpaed away. Urahara did not bother to follow. He had bigger problems. Yuruchi needed a portal back to the living world several minutes ago. He too vanished and reappeared back in his shop, before Shunpai and Ji back down to the underground training room and immediately casting the same spell that had opened the portal to begin with. He could feel the spell take hold, could taste hell's Ryatsu, yet for some reason the portal did not open. Releasing the spell and attempting it a second time, with the same results, Urahara frowned and turned to his computers that were monitoring hell and its connection to the living world. "Hell is just as close as before," he muttered. "But there's DMN. If the founder of the Rand D Institute was reading the data correctly, he'd found the source of the problem. Mayuri had managed to set up a barrier between the two worlds that severely inhibited the use of dimensional travel between them through use of any means save the purification inherent in a Zanpakudo. And to add insult to injury, Mayuri had used the very same principles Urahara had implemented for swapping Karakura with its fake in-soul society. Urahara took off his hat and pinched the bridge of his nose in frustration. His old colleague could not have had worse timing. It was now impossible for him to open a portal to hell except for finding a hollow whose old human life had been evil enough to warrant hell. Or killing such a human myself, Urahara corrected absently, but he had no such intention. Hachi and Tessai walked in then, each a little tired from having defeated the onslaught of hollows. "What has happened, Urahara-dano?" Tessai immediately asked, seeing Urahara's pensive expression. He quickly explained what he'd learned in the last few minutes. "We're going to try to break through anyway." "How?" "We attack the weakest link in the barrier. The gates of hell." Mayuri had to leave the barrier there intentionally weak in order to allow for hellbound souls to make the transition, Urahara outlined. "Once we summon the gates, they should open on their own, but if they don't, we all attack with our most powerful Hado and force it open." "What if that doesn't work?" Hachijin couldn't help but ask. Urahara was silent as he traversed the room to a box he rarely kept out of his sight. He picked it up gingerly, knowing what was held within. Desperate times call for desperate measures. One way or another, the gates will open. After they do, Tessai, you need to use Bakudo 77, Tentikura to tell Ichigo and Yuruchi to return to the gates. Hachi, your job will be to make sure the gates stay open. I'll deal with whatever tries to interfere. Understood, the two Kido masters acknowledged. They left the shop for a nearby field. The gates of hell were simply too large, even for Urahara's underground training room. The three of them stood evenly spaced in a triangular fashion, with Hachijin as the focal point. Hachi summoned his hollow mask, and as one, they began to chant the forbidden incantation, each of them focusing on summoning the gates of hell. They summoned the bottom of the doors first, the barrier fighting them, but they repeated the chant, over and over, devoting more and more Ryatsu. It took several minutes of non-stop chanting and a great deal of Ryatsu, but the gates of hell finally materialized. As there was no med soul to claim, they stood steadfast, refusing to open. Taking a breath and attempting to recover from the effort of summoning the gates through the powerful barrier Mayuri had placed, Urahara took his hat off and wiped the sweat from his brow, just before an intensely familiar Ryatsu rocked through the vicinity. He turned to see Mayuri, Kairaku, Yukitake, and Yamamoto stepping through a Senkaman. Mayuri was showing off every one of his white teeth in a gleeful smile, while Kairaku and Yukitake looked rather concerned and uneasy. Yamamoto, however, wore an expression of thunderous anger. "Urahara Kisuke," he roared. "You dare to disrupt our solution to protect the living world from hell itself." Urahara found himself standing straight, looking icily at the Soteicho as he endured and ignored the fire-oriented Ryatsu of the millennia-old Shinigami. Yes, he replied softly, coolly. I dare. I dare to take the high ground and do what I feel is right. I dare to do whatever is in my power to those I care for from hell. I dare to place my faith in Kurosaki Ichigo, and DMN the consequences. The words seemed to strike a chord with Kairaku and Yukitake, who glanced at each other significantly before walking quietly to Urahara's side, turning to face Yamamoto, whose body language shifted in surprise for a moment. Both of you, he stated more than asked. Both of us, Kairaku confirmed anyway. Ichigo-kun has always defied the odds, Yamaji. I won't be the one to take away his chance to save his family. Ichigo has done us a great service, sensei, Yukitake pleaded. He has grown so strong, stronger than any of us. If anyone can venture into hell and save his family, he can. We owe it to him to let him try. You fools, Yamamoto muttered, before raising his voice. You cannot understand. By entering hell he has doomed himself. Hell does not so willingly let its souls leave. By now Kurosaki Ichigo's sisters and mother have fallen to its effects and become Togabido themselves, if they had not already been eaten by the Kushinada. The air itself will force his hollowification and he will lose himself. Yet he has recovered from full hollowification not once, but twice without ill effects, Urahara corrected with narrow eyes. He has since been able to fully hollowify without losing his mind, case in point in his battle against Aizen in Soul Society. You do not know, you could not know what having such a powerful person in hell will affect. It is forbidden knowledge, far beyond the clearance of Taicho. I only gained clearance from the Zero Division after I became Soteicho. Yamamoto bellowed angrily. The best case scenario is that Kurosaki and his family all die in hell and remain trapped there. You must be joking, Yamaji, Kairaku commented, shaking his head. If that's the best case scenario, what's the worst? Complete annihilation of the living world by hell itself. All the more reason to get Ichigo out of there before that happens. Urahara decided. Hachi, Tensai. Get those gates open. Hi, they replied in unison. You youngsters need to learn your place. Yamamoto growled as his cane's outer shell promptly incinerated, revealing his Zanpakudo. Kuratsuchi Taicho, deal with Urahara Kisuk. Reduce all creation of ash, Ryujin Jaka. Kairaku and Yukitake wordlessly brought out their own shurikai, each of their incantations were far too long to properly incant when fighting their sensei. You are wrong, Yamaji. Kairaku called out strongly. Ichigo has been wronged far too long for us to deny him a chance to save his family. Yukitake joined in. Kuratsuchi's smile was impossibly wide as he drew his own Zanpakudo. You have no idea how long I have wanted this, Urahara Kisuk. I beg to differ, Mayuri-chan, Kisuk murmured, taking off his beloved bucket hat and tossing it away. He could not afford to be an eccentric shopkeeper for this fight. His eyes hardened as they met his successor's gaze. Urahara was once more the Taicho-level assassin of the Onmitsukido, genius founder of the Research and Development Institute. Rip asunder, Ashisoji Jizo, Mayuri murmured almost lovingly, his blade warping into a golden deformed trident, with curved blades, the middle one being longer than the other two. Where the blades met the handle was a golden baby's head with eyes half open. Urahara promptly vanished and reappeared a scant moment later directly behind Mayuri, releasing his shurikai wordlessly as he charged it with energy. Shibari, Beneheim. Mayuri smirked, not bothering to move. Bakudo 81, Danku. The black and red webbing hit the invisible barrier before falling to the ground, useless. But Urahara was already gone, Shuanpaenji a short distance away. Kamisori, Beneheim. He unleashed a small, but powerful crescent of red energy that sliced its way through the air towards Mayuri. Urahara's successor shook his head. Useless. Bakudo 73, Tazancho. Just before the attack could hit him, an inverted azure pyramid materialized around Mayuri, the bottom buried in the ground he stood upon. Urahara scoffed at the snap judgment. "Tazancho, Mayuri? Is that really how you want to play this?" Shuanpeng once more above, Urahara flashed to above Mayuri's position. He snapped his left hand up with his palm facing the exact center of the pyramid, where he knew it would be furthest away from the 5 points of power that made up the spell and therefore should be weakest. Urahara instantly lined himself up behind his hand, as though to shield himself, while making subtle movements with his right hand. Heido 88, Hiryu Gekizoku Shinten Reiho. For only a moment, Urahara's left hand glowed bright electric blue with swirling Ryatsu, before a truly massive typhoon of lightning-infused Ryatsu, more than twice as wide as Urahara was tall, erupted with enough light to nearly blind the scientist. No wonder Tezai always wears those sunglasses when he casts this, Urahara couldn't help but think, just before the spell crashed down on the pyramid barrier. Unable to withstand the raw power, the Tazancho cracked, splintered, and then finally shattered, allowing the rest of Urahara's Heido to hit the ground. There was hardly any more power left in the spell after breaking the barrier, however, and all it did was leave an admittedly large scorch mark in the ground. Urahara frowned. Mayuri had disappeared, but he knew that the Taicho would not abandon his chance to silence his predecessor so easily. But where is he? He was suddenly taken by surprise as a hand clasped his shoulder, before promptly exploding on contact. As the smoke from the explosion began to fade, a camouflaged figure walked forward from on the ground behind Urahara, his skin flaking away to reveal Mayuri's usual appearance, minus his left arm. "Did you forget about my nice hata and jabber kinda, Urahara?" "Not at all," came Urahara's voice from the smoke as the last wisps were taken by the wind. He was completely unharmed. "Did you forget about my portable jagai?" "Humph, hardly," Mayuri scoffed, casually reaching into his coat and pulling out a vial of green serum, injecting it into his shoulder. Immediately, his whole arm regenerated, taking mere seconds to return him to full functionality. Stretching it experimentally, he shook his head. "You truly infuriate me, Urahara Kisuk." "I live to serve," Urahara mocked. "Shall we continue?" "Wait, I'm sorry. We're already done." "What?" But suddenly Mayuri was caught in the webbing of Urahara's first technique, Shibari, wrapped from head to toe. He fell to the floor painfully, glaring up at Urahara as the former assassin landed gently on the ground. "You purposely left your technique active," he accused. "You quietly fed it Ryatsu and made it spread across the ground while I was inside my barriers, and talked to me to buy time to finish the job. Guilty as charged. Now, I don't deny your ingenuousness, so I'm sure you would figure out a way out of the webbing sooner rather than later. So I'll give you a choice." He placed Beneheim just above one of the links of webbing that were spread along the ground. "Either you use your useful turn-to-liquid trick, or I blow you up." Mayuri growled at the former assassin angrily. "DMNU, Urahara Kisuk." Sealing Ashisoji Jizo, Mayuri managed to pierce his side slightly with his sealed Zanpakudo, before promptly turning into a pea-green liquid and easily passing through the webbing. Urahara let the Shibari spell collapse. Before Shuanpeng away, there was little time, and he could tell that Tezai and Hachi had not yet managed to open the gates of hell. He could tell that Kairaku and Yukitake were fighting Yamamoto still, judging by the rapidly rising heat in the area, but they were apparently keeping him busy. Reappearing next to Tezai, who was in the middle of quietly chanting the full incantation of what was no doubt an extremely high-level spell, Urahara channeled a large portion of his remaining Ryatsu into Beneheim, charging up for a powerful attack to add to Tezai's own. Urahara quickly recognized some of the lines that Tezai was chanting, and he began to smirk once he realized what Tezai was doing. Master of Kido indeed. Suddenly, surprising Urahara and Tezai and nearly making them lose their concentration, Yukitake appeared next to them in the telltale flicker of Shuanpa. "Whatever techniques you're using, use them now," he cried out. "Now, Sojio no Kodawari." He moved forward with his right hand, unleashing an enormous blast of flames. Yamamoto's flames. Nake, Beneheim. Heido 91, Senju Koten Taiho. Tensai bellowed, throwing both hands up to aim at the gates. Heido 88, Hiryu Gekizoku Shinten Reiho. From his left hand came the same powerful lightning attack that Urahara had cast mere minutes before, and from his right more than a dozen pink spears of light shot into the lightning, merging and changing it. The lightning wave broke up into several smaller pieces, each piece coating the highly explosive spears of light with its electric blue energy, which then turned a vibrant violet as they shot forward towards the gates of hell. Combination Heido, Lightning Crash Destroyer of Heaven. The three attacks coincided at the barrier guarding the gates, and then there was silence for a brief moment before the world as Urahara knew it exploded. Meanwhile, down in hell, Ichigo and the Vizard were finishing their genocide of the Kushinada. Very few yet remained after the breathtaking display of raw power had annihilated their brethren. Perhaps a couple of dozen had survived due to various outcroppings and sheer luck, but they made no attempt to move forward and continue the attack. Instead, they were retreating. Yes, Yuruchi observed, they are. But to where? The hollow Ichigo had become screamed his triumph, the hollowified Vizards behind him echoing it briefly before falling still. With his main priority complete, Ichigo lifted his mother to his eye level. She had fallen completely limp. Ichigo made a querying noise, a blend between a grunt and a thoughtful hum. Getting no answer, Ichigo turned around and walked past the Vizard, who parted for him without a sound. Karen stared at Ichigo as though seeing him for the first time, but she didn't move. For the moment, Ichigo deposited his mother in front of her, and then turned his attention to Yuzu. Yuzu was on the ground, lying still. Too still. Ichigo stabbed Tensa Zangetsu into the sand, then knelt and picked her up. The clink of a chain caught his ear and he twisted her around until he could see the cause. There was a chain coming out of her chest. He did not know why, but he suddenly hurt. Inside him, there was pain. Why? Why was the chain bad? Why did the girl not move? He yelled wordlessly at her, trying to provoke the girl into moving. She did not. He did not understand. Why did he hurt? Ichigo made a frustrated noise. He felt as though he should know this. What the hell did you get yourself into this time, King? What? Noise in his head. Ichigo spun on the spot, quickly dropping the girl off with the others, and brandished Tensa Zangetsu in a defensive fashion. Ha! Weird. Ichigo, you there? More noise. Was this an attack? Okay, seriously, answer me. And what's with the Ryatsu? It didn't sound like an attack, just more noise. More questioning than anything else. Ichigo grunted and decided to ignore it till it went away. Ichigo, I swear that if you don't start talking this instant I will take over. Right now. I'm serious. Fine, you asked for it. Kazidor de la Luna opened his eyes, blinking a couple of times as Ichigo's body changed slightly to reflect the change in ownership. He dismissed the resurrection, not sensing an enemy nearby, but he got the nagging sense something was wrong. He turned around, and spotted Ichigo's family. One of them just continued to stare creepily at him until he shifted around uneasily. Oi. Karen, right? Ichigo. No. I'm the inner hollow, Kazidor. Karen suddenly got up, her apparent state of shock and surprise giving way to genuine anger. Let me talk to Ichigo. Kazidor backed up a pace. Hey, I would if I could. He seems to have checked out, though, and I've got no idea what the hell is going on. Mind filling me in? Now's not the time, Kazidor de la Luna, Yuruchi's voice replied instead, walking towards him alongside Soi Fon and someone Kazidor didn't really know. DMN, what did I miss? We've got to get out of here before she dies too. What? Yuruchi looked at Kazidor stone-faced. Kurosaki Masaki and Kurosaki Yuzu are dead and have been claimed by Hell. Check their chests, there are hell-binding chains. If Karen dies in hell as well, she will be claimed too. Let's move. Kazidor's head whirled, and he felt a distinct ache in where his heart should be at the news that his mother and sister were dead, but he knew he had to protect the remainder of his family. Protect first, vengeance later. But then a rumble started nearby, the ryatsu that lingered in the air suddenly intensified 100-fold. Kazidor shivered, something was coming, and he had the sinking feeling that it was coming for him. Hey, you, he pointed at one of the hollows, who were they anyway? This one had a very familiar-looking mask, like an Egyptian pharaoh. His body was yellow-white as desert-scorched sands, his bone-straight blonde hair down at shoulder level. The hollow was also wearing an ivory sleeveless robe-like garment. For a few moments, Kazidor could swear that there was something appearing and disappearing on the robes, but it was either too soft to see, or he was hallucinating. Take Karen, Yuzu, and Emasaki. He stuttered on the last name, instinctually wanting to call her mom, but with Karen not recognizing him as part of her brother, that didn't feel like the best time to bring up that can of worms. Follow one of them to the living world and guard them till I get there. He didn't know how he knew, but he could feel deep in his bones that they would obey his orders. The hollow nodded, picked up Karen bodily, ignoring her protests, before shifting her under an arm so he could take the other two under the other. Then he looked at Yuruchi expectantly. Soi Fon, you show him the way back up, Yuruchi ordered after a moment. Hi, Yuruchi-sama. She shunpaed away, and the hollow sonido-ed quickly after her. Yuruchi looked at Kazidor curiously. Interesting choice, picking Shinji. Kazidor blinked. Wait, that was Shinji. Hirako Shinji, as in the Vizard? Yep. Kazidor immediately took another look at the other hollows. Now he could see the connection between the hollows and their Vizard selves. Kensei seemed to have bulked up in size a fair amount, and had several thick white cylindrical things sticking out of his back. His hands had grown even bigger in proportion to the rest of his body, and was covered in a white armor. His mask, which usually took the form of a hockey face guard of sorts, had grown to cover the top of his head as well. Love, who Kazidor could identify only by his enormous afro and mask, seemed to have taken the Oni motif to its logical conclusion. His shirkai, though not visible at the moment, was a gigantic spiked bat, his mask was that of an Oni, so to Kazidor it was rather predictable that Love's transformation had completed the process. Love had become more broad-shouldered, but not as large. His skin had turned dark blue, much to Kazidor's private amusement, and his shirt was irrevocably torn up, giving him a savage look. He too had formed claws and talon-like feet. Rose, as opposed to Love, had grown in a hard-to-predict way. His mask prior to Resurrection had, to Ichigo's thoughts, always resembled the mask a doctor from the Renaissance era would wear to prevent themselves from falling ill from whatever was ailing their patients. It had been a class assignment once, Ichigo had explained later, and he truly could not think of anything else it could be. But Kazidor knew that Zanpakuto and Hollow were inextricably linked within the Vizard, and shared a common theme. Kazidor himself centered around the theme of the moon with Zangetsu. And Rose's Zanpakuto did not look like something a doctor would use. Rose's shirkai was a golden, flower-tipped, whip-like weapon, and Ichigo had first-hand experience in its musical abilities. Music was the theme here, Rose was a pianist. So while his Zanpakuto had become the instrument of death, Rose's hollow took the pianist's features to their extremes. Instead of growing in size, Rose had instead become almost skeletally thin, his bone-white arms and fingers growing longer, sharper almost. His thick, long, wavy blonde hair straightened somewhat and reached past his shoulders, and his own hollow hole appeared in the middle of his torso, underneath where the heart would be, about where the diaphragm was. His hollow mask, too, had grown to cover the entirety of his head, giving him a distinctly disturbing look. Mashiro, however, had never showed Ichigo or Kazidor her shirkai. All Kazidor knew about the nature of her powers was that she had a hornet mask. To Kazidor's disappointment, even her hollowification did not reveal very much, her legs and waist had grown white armor, now appearing very insect-like from the segmentation of the armor. Her mask had not grown around her head like the other Vizard, either. When he looked harder, Mishiro's hands had also acquired a little white armor, but all in all there was little to be gleaned. Lisa had apparently become a Valkyrie, if Kazidor's first impression was correct. Her original mask had been diamond-shaped with 2 slits, one horizontal and one vertical, which came together to form a cross. Her Resurrection mask, like most of the others, had grown around her head, but hers had left the top of her head open, which to Kazidor was rather unusual. Then again, nothing is usual about this. Remembering Lisa's shirkai, a very large and long pole arm with a monk's spade on the end, Kazidor noted that her Resurrection had almost completely covered her old clothes, garbing her in a highly functional bone battle skirt and an ivory breastplate. Kazidor was completely unsurprised about Hyori's transformation. She was all about offense, so of course she'd gained more weapons from her body. But what Kazidor was surprised about, was that not one of his fellow hollowified Vizards turned Arankar still had their Zanpakudo. But there was no more time to think on it, as the sands no more than a dozen yards away from Kazidor exploded upwards, the Ryatsu of hell becoming stronger and thicker once again. "Who are you?" Yuruchi demanded. The sands fell, and Kazidor could now see the being. He appeared human, light-skinned with shoulder-length, blood-red hair. He was tall, and broad-shouldered, though his muscles looked deteriorated, as though he'd recently gone through a very severe starvation. Dressed only in rags that barely covered his legs, his red eyes nevertheless glittered with arrogance and malice. "I should thank you, Hollow," he said with a mocking bow, ignoring Yuruchi entirely. "You have resurrected me after thousands of years of torment. I think I will make you a general in my new army." Yes, I'm feeling quite generous, I'll even let you keep your own soldiers." "Just who the hell are you?" Kazidor questioned forcefully. The being laughed. "Oh, funny with words are you? Even better. I'll give you a hint. You've just slaughtered and freed thousands of fragments of my soul and will, allowing them to rejoin and give me form and power once more." The ally who Kazidor still did not recognize looked particularly taken aback as he connected the dots. "No, you can't be." The Ryatsu grew once more, alongside the stranger's brutal grin. "Oh yes. I am hell, and welcome to your damnation. Ha ha ha. How's that for breaking from canon? There is a huge backstory to hell that will be explained in later chapters. Kazidor doesn't have access to Ichigo's recent memories because, well, Ichigo seems to have checked out. You'll see what happened to him later, but it has to do with why Kazidor kept his sanity while the rest of the Vizard turned Arankar didn't. I really struggled to set up the hollow versions of the Vizard. I think my best work was with Rose, if I'm honest, or maybe Lisa. Chapter 48, Matter of the Soul. Kazidor shook his head, trying to make sense of it all. Wait just a med minute. Last thing I remember is going to sleep in Ichigo's soul during his vacation to the beach. Next thing I know, I'm in hell, Ichigo's not answering, his mother and sister are dead, his other sister nearly so. And apparently I've been doing some killing, which somehow freed up Kami knows how many soul fragments. Those soul fragments recombined and made that guy. Can someone please either wake me up, or explain just how the F this happened? Ichigo's sisters got kidnapped by Togabido, residents of hell. His mother got banished to hell by some nobles in Soul Society, Yuruchi bit out tersely, not taking her eyes off hell. Ah. The dots were beginning to connect. Okay, so Ichigo decided to go to hell, apparently with our good friends the Vizard here, you. He looked around, doing a head count. Toshiro, Rukia, Renji, and new guy whose name I don't know. Wow, a lot of muscle here. Somehow along the way, the Vizard hollowified I take it. That would be my doing, hell claimed. This is my dimension. My Ryatsu tends to have side effects on Shinigami hollow hybrids if they stick around too long. Kazidor looked at him incredulously for a moment, but then sighed and shook his head. Naturally, Ichigo takes us to the one place we can't be the strongest thing around. Of course. So off we go to hell. We obviously find everyone. Shit happens, we get attacked by that guy's soul fragments, we kill them all and go insane in the process. Masaki and Yuzu die and are apparently claimed by hell. And here we are. And here we are, Hell agreed, spreading his arms as if saying, what can you do? But I admit to having a question of my own. You are a Shinigami Hollow hybrid, correct? Yeah, I'm an Arrancar. So. I thought as much. Arrancar, just by being here, normally enter a heightened state of aggression, to the point of attacking the first thing they see, Hell explained. He started to walk around Kazidor, inspecting him like he would an experiment. Yet, instead of attacking me, you instead demand answers. Instead of madness, you instead gained rationality. Interesting. Will you let Kurosaki Masaki and Kurosaki Yuzu free? Yuruchi questioned steadily, interrupting Kazidor's and Hell's thoughts. They are not yours by any action of their own, and Yuzu is still human, not a spirit. Hell laughed softly, but it still gave Kazidor goosebumps. Let them free. Why would I do that, Shinigami? Their souls are mine now, that is the price of my dimension. Those who die here are endlessly reborn as my tools and slaves. How they came to be here is none of my concern. I see. Her face betrayed no emotion. And will you let us go without accosting us? Hell smiled. As I said, I am in a very, very generous mood. I have just been reborn, after all, and I have you all to thank for that kindness. You are not mine, so I have no reason to keep you. You may all leave. In fact, let me help you out. With a dismissive wave of his hand, an oval-shaped portal opened up, clearly showing the real world, where Urahara, Tensai, Hachi and Yukitake all looked stunned. Yuruchi stepped through without hesitation, rushing to Urahara's side. Hitsugaya quickly did the same, joining Yukitake. Rukia and Renji spared each other a glance and followed as well. Kazidor looked at the ally who still hadn't given his name. What about you? You coming? He sadly shook his head. I am Togabido as well. I cannot. He held up his left wrist, from which a chain dangled a short ways. An instant later, the chain shimmered, and Kazidor could see how it linked him to Hell, the person, and the dimension both. If you ever reach Ichigo again, tell him I will wait as long as it takes. Kazidor blinked, confused, but he nodded nonetheless. Then he turned to Hell. What price would have to be paid, in order for you to release Kurosaki Masaki and Yuzu? Hell considered a few moments, and then let out a low, but rough, pulse of Ryatsu. The Togabido shivered as it passed through him. Then Hell whistled lowly. My, what pure souls they have. You're quite right, they should not have come here at all, but I will not deny such a gift when it is given so freely. I would require 2 souls of equal pureness in exchange, he finally declared. Oh boy. Ichigo is not going to like this. Hollow, the Togabido spoke up. He swallowed, apparently gathering his courage. The chains can be he was suddenly cut off, by what was unknown, but he seemed to be choking. If Kazidor was reading the impressions on his neck correctly, then his own hell-binding chain was choking him. He gave a questioning glance to Hell, who merely smiled. Off you go now. Unless you want to join me, of course. No, Kazidor thought, that's really not something I want. In all honesty, he was more worried about what had happened to Ichigo. What could have happened that would keep Ichigo from responding to him? Could Hell's Ryatsu have somehow buried Ichigo deep within his own psyche? Kazidor resolved to enter his inner world at his first opportunity to demand answers from Zangetsu. Kazidor hurriedly stepped through the portal, and Hell looked mildly disappointed as the Vizard followed suit mindlessly. With another gesture, the portal vanished. Refocusing his attention on his surroundings, the Arrancar noticed that Urahara was being helped to his feet by Yuruchi, while Yukitake was coughing weakly and being supported by Hitsugaya. Shinji had apparently made it out with his cargo, who were still being carried, with Karen seeming to gain a little more color in her face now that was out in the living world. Soi Fon stood to the side appearing slightly awkward, not knowing what to do next. Yamamoto appeared out of nowhere, his Zanpakudo alight with the fires of his Ryatsu. Kazidor nearly jumped back in surprise, while Rukia and Renji trembled under the pressure of the Soteicho's presence. "You fools," he roared. "Shunsui, come here." Kairaku Shunpaed next to him, lowering his twin blades. "Ichigo," he greeted, then took another look and frowned. "Wait. You're his hollow, aren't you?" "Yo," Kazidor acknowledged, raising a hand in greeting himself. "Kazidor de la Luna," Yamamoto rumbled angrily, "where is Kurosaki Ichigo?" "I'd like to know that too, Yamamoto." "I only just woke up about 5 minutes ago," Kazidor confessed. "In her hollow sleep?" Soi Fon murmured under her breath, a little taken aback. Kazidor didn't bother to answer that. "And who are these hollows?" Yamamoto demanded, pointing his sword at them. The Vizard didn't even flinch. "They're the Vizard," Kazidor answered. "Apparently their resurrection was forced on them by hell. But luckily for us all, hollows of any evolution obey higher evolutions. That's a matter of hollow instinct. As I'm an Ajucha's Arankar, they obey me, and that'll probably continue until I dismiss them or until they regain their sanity." Yamamoto appeared to make a snap decision, and suddenly his blade lost its flames, returning to a sealed state. He pushed it into the air before him and opened a senkamen. "Come with me to Soul Society, all of you. You must know what you all have unleashed with your actions." "What about Masaki and Yuzu?" Kazidor asked. "They've got the hell chains attached. It is too late for them." "The chains cannot be broken," Yamamoto declared solemnly. "As they are out of hell, they will not revive, but neither can they be saved. The kindest thing to do would be to burn them, destroy their souls so as not to suffer an eternity of torment in hell." "Like hell you will," Karen yelled, wriggling out of Shinji's grasp. "That's my twin sister and mother. How do you know they can't be saved? How can you know if you haven't even tried?" Kakudo said Ichigo had the power to break those chains. Kazidor's head snapped towards Karen. Now he finally had a name for that Togabido guy. That's probably what he was saying. The chains can be broken. "Kurosaki Ichigo's status is unknown," Soi Fon answered the girl ruthlessly. "And hell will come for their souls soon. Would you gamble your brother miraculously returning and having the power to break those chains against an eternity of torment?" "Yes," Karen shouted angrily. "Ichigo has never, ever let any of us down. We are his family, and he will come for us." Failing that, came a new voice as he entered the clearing, "I will." Kurosaki Ishin entered the field in his Shinigami form. "I have failed my family too long. Should Ichigo be unable to break the chains, I will." "And how will you do that, Ishin?" Yamamoto questioned quietly, but intently. "You know perfectly well that I have completed Jinzen," Ishin answered calmly. "And there is nothing the final Getsuga Tensho cannot destroy. While I would lose my powers once more, it would be worth it to resurrect my daughter and my wife." There was a moment of silence before the leader of Soul Society nodded assent. "It would be a fitting end," Yamamoto mused. An exile losing his powers, in the process of restoring the rightful place of two souls who were not destined for hell. Everything fitting together neatly. "Very well. We will place barrier Kido to store them and monitor them. That should delay hell from locating and retrieving them. Now come, we must discuss the consequences of your descent into hell." "Tensai and I will stay here in the living world," Urahara volunteered. "Hell must still be monitored, and hollows exterminated. Plus, I don't think your Senkamen has a matter converter, so Karen and Yuzu would need to stay behind in any case. Hachi can stay as well to set up his special barriers to store Yuzu and Masaki. Yuruchi will fill me in on the details when you're done." The goddess of Shunpa sent him a dirty look, but nodded anyway. As these were all valid points, Yamamoto nodded again, allowing the deviation. An hour later, the hollowified Vizard, all the Taicho and Fukuteicho, and Kazidor de la Luna all stood in the Taicho meeting chamber. As Yukitake had no Fukuteicho, Rukia stood next to him. Jin was absent, as he was in a medical coma induced by Unohana. Kazidor stood in front of the Vizard, clearly indicating that he was their leader, while all the Fukuteicho stood next to their respective Taicho. Hinamori looked torn between confusion and fear, casting aside glances at Kazidor. Isshin stood next to Kazidor as well, looking calm but serious. Yamamoto slammed his cane into the floor, calling all attention to him. "We have a crisis," he announced. "Perhaps worse than that of Aizen Sosuke. Hell has arisen." "Ah, forgive me Yamaji, but I'm confused. I thought hell was the dimension, and we've already known it exists for some time now." Kairaku commented. Yamamoto nodded. "Hell is the name of the dimension for a single reason: the dimension is an extension of its creator." "How is that possible?" Kuratsuchi asked, clearly very intrigued. "The amount of Ryuryoku needed to create even a small pocket dimension is enormous. To create and maintain a dimension with diverse environments would be astronomical." "Or his power was evolved," Kazidor pointed out loudly. "He went and upgraded, didn't he? He kept getting stronger and stronger, evolving beyond whatever he started out as. Then he created a dimension for himself." Yamamoto nodded. "That is what the records state. The rest of what I am about to tell you is a state secret, and cannot be told to anyone under penalty of death, both to you and whomever you told. I am authorized by the Zero Division, and the Barin family, to share this information only under the direst of circumstances." "The Barin family?" Hitsugaya repeated, connecting the dots. "Didn't Ichigo?" "Yes," Yamamoto answered Hitsugaya's unasked question. "Though it is not widely known, the Barin family was charged by the Spirit King to collect and maintain records of all forbidden knowledge, including hollowification, and all things pertaining to hell. The ones who banished Kurosaki Ichigo's mother have already been caught by Kuchiki Taicho and Kurosaki. They are currently imprisoned and will be interrogated to uncover the rest of the conspirators. However, the head of the Barin family has shared their records of hell for the duration of this crisis." To return to the topic at hand, long ago, there was a three-sided war between the Spirit King, the King of Hueco Mundo, and Hell. The Spirit King successfully purified the King of Hueco Mundo, but Hell had designed his dimension so that whomever perished while within it became under his rule. He remained in his dimension and sent his forces out to the living world and soul society to perform his work. Whenever his forces died, he called them back to Hell via their chains of fate, which he had perverted into the chains of Hell. As a result, Hell could never be truly conquered. He would resurrect upon his death, with no damage to his power or his memories. The Spirit King could not simply destroy Hell's soul, that would destroy the dimension, and the Spirit King was forced to admit that it provided a necessary service. It took the truly evil of humanity, leaving soul society the final destination of ultimately good souls. So the Spirit King shattered Hell's soul into thousands, millions of pieces. Those pieces became the beings we now call the Kushinada, Hell's will. Due to Hell's own rules, he cannot truly die. When a Kushinada would die, it would revive with its soul fragment. The Kushinada would always seek out and eat the strongest within its realm to attempt to regain the Ryatsu it needed to return to their original form, and would as a result prevent any from growing strong enough to kill more than one at a time. This, the Spirit King felt, would be Hell's eternal prison, where he would be trapped within his own rules forever. But that ended today, when Kurosaki Ichigo, Soi Fon Taicho, Hitsugaya Taicho, Abarai Fukuteicho and Kuchiki Rukia entered Hell with the exiles known as the Vizard to save Kurosaki's family. Countless Kushinada were killed simultaneously, allowing their soul fragments to rejoin and resurrect Hell, albeit as a shadow of his former self. We can assume that Hell will once again launch a campaign to take total control over all dimensions while seeking out the remaining pieces of his soul. We must take measures to counter this threat. Kuratsuchi Taicho, all current research projects are hereby suspended. Focus all efforts toward strengthening the barriers surrounding hell, and restricting interdimensional travel. Kairaku Taicho, Yukatake Taicho, Kuchiki Taicho, you will go through the Barine records and attempt to determine the method by which the Spirit King shattered Hell's soul. Hitsugaya Taicho, Abarifuka Taicho, Kuchiki Rukia, you are hereby reassigned to the living world. Aid Urahara Kisuk in guarding the living world. Kazidor de la Luna, work with the Vizard. At this point, all strength is needed. Consider all laws considering Shinigami Hollow hybrids under suspension, do what you must in order to regain their sanity and convince them to work with Soul Society. Also, determine what has happened to your host, Kurosaki Ichigo. Zaraki Taicho, I understand Madarame Mikaku has Bankai. Make him as strong as you can, he will be one of primary assault when the time comes. Soi Fon Taicho, Kamamura Taicho, step up your training, your Bankai will be needed to cut through and blast away the armies when we assault hell in his own dimension. Tozen Taicho, you will accompany Kazidor de la Luna and the Vizard to improve your hollowification. Unohana Taicho, continue to train your division in the healing arts, and scout the other divisions for those with healing talent, they will be needed. All Fuka Taicho, you are to take over and delegate as many duties of your division as needed, and then train under your Taicho when time permits. I will contact the Zero Division and request an audience with the Spirit King. Any questions? There was silence. Dismissed. A short while later, Kazidor returned to the living world with the Vizard, the various Taicho, Rukia and Renji. Not particularly wanting the Taicho to know where the Vizard warehouse was just in case he had to hide there on a later date, Kazidor led them all to Urahara's shop and immediately was granted access to the underground training basement. Isshin, Rukia, and Renji stayed upstairs with Urahara, not wanting to be in the blast radius of Vizard training just in case one of them woke up or went berserk. Kazidor de la Luna, Tozen began, I admit to some confusion from the Soteicho's order. How am I to improve my hollowification? When you enter Resurrection, do you still get to use your Bankai? Kazidor asked bluntly. No. I merge with Suzumushi to enter my Resurrection, Tozen replied. How would I still use Bankai when my Zanpakuto is merged? Kazidor sighed. You skipped a step. You have to beat your inner hollow and take his Zanpakuto. Then you merge with that Zanpakuto. To prove his point, he materialized Ichigo's Black Tensa Zangetsu. See? Tozen appeared interested. While I am blind outside of my hollowification, I believe I do understand. I sense hollow Ryatsu from one blade, and Shinigami Ryatsu from the other. The differentiation allows you to use both Resurrection and Bankai simultaneously. Very well. I will begin my meditation immediately. With that, he sat down, crossed his legs, and laid Suzumushi's sealed form across his legs. Kazidor recognized the stance, he was undergoing Jinzen to talk to Suzumushi, and his inner hollow. Suppose I should do the same. He twisted around to face the Vizard. Sit down, will ya? And don't do anything until I say. As one, the hollowified Vizard all sat down. Satisfied, Kazidor settled down to the floor himself and focused on his inner world, pulling himself in almost immediately. He looked around. The blood-red moon was in the sky, the skyscrapers were still around, there was no scene of mass destruction that could possibly explain why Ichigo would be buried within his own mind. Oi! Zangetsu! I am here. Kazidor turned to the side and saw Zangetsu pensively sitting on a flagpole, staring at him. What the hell happened to Ichigo? Kazidor demanded. Where is he? Why am I awake? And why the F isn't he answering me? The answer to all those questions is the same. Ichigo buried himself deep into his own soul, and pushed you into control. He cannot hear you. Kazidor growled. Then why can't I just pull him up? Right now this is my soul. Because I will not let you. What? Zangetsu jumped down from his flagpole and began walking to Kazidor, drawing his blade. Look into the blade's reflection, and you will see your answers. Kazidor peered into the dim moonlight reflecting from the magnificent cleaver, and then saw Ichigo's face contorted into a ferocious snarl as he swung his shuriken against himself. The image was too quick to get a good look, but it looked like Ichigo was somehow fighting himself. I don't understand. Who is Ichigo fighting? Himself. Or rather, a manifestation of himself. That manifestation represents the person he could be, should he embrace Hell's ideals. That is the reason you were not affected by Hell's Ryatsu. Ichigo was taking it all into himself, trusting you to take care of his family. How is this possible? Kazidor demanded. Zangetsu gave a half-smile. Ichigo realized as the resurrection finished that Hell's Ryatsu was the cause of his unwilling transformation. He knew he could not win against both his hollow instinct and Hell's manipulation, so he called you out of the depths of his soul. You are Arankar, and retain both reason and the ability to control your hollow instinct. That left Ichigo to handle the effects of Hell. As for why he is within me. You are the one in control, Kazidor de la Luna. That makes me and Ichigo the source of your power. Just like you and I normally share one spiritual body when Ichigo is in control, he and I have the option of sharing one body when you are in control. To keep you from being unduly affected by the Hell fragment, he pulled himself and his Hell double into my body. I am, for all intents and purposes, the buffer while they battle. Admittedly, it is not a pleasant feeling. But we've left Hell. Kazidor protested. Why is the battle still going on? An unexpected side effect, Zangetsu admitted. I am uncertain of the consequences as of yet, but I have faith Ichigo will win. It is simply a matter of time. Meanwhile, within Zangetsu, Ichigo skid back from a kick he'd just received from his opponent. Using the airwalk technique to slow down, he readied Zangetsu into a defensive position, glaring intently at his doppelganger. Hell Ichigo was dressed similarly to Ichigo himself, with chains attached to each ankle and wrist. His hair was no longer the orange of Ichigo, but instead was deep obsidian, reaching to his shoulder blades. Hell Ichigo's eyes too were different, a blood-red iris with midnight blue sclera. Why do you fight me? Hell Ichigo pleaded in what sounded like genuine distress. I want the same things you do. I want to protect my family, I want to make sure they can't be hurt anymore. I do want those things, but you would pervert that desire. Ichigo rebutted. How is it perverting our desire to protect Yuzu, and Karen, and Mom, and everyone else if we make a few examples of what happens if you try? Hell Ichigo demanded. Those nobles, the Barine, they deserve to die. They sent Mom to hell. An eternity of torment. We would be showing mercy by not granting them the same fate but merely killing them. I want to kill them just as much as you do, you know that, but we can't be the ones who decide who lives and who dies. Ichigo protested. We have so much power, it'd be easy to fall into that trap, but we become a spiritual dictator. An object of oppression. It's only oppression if we oppress them. Hell Ichigo yelled, trying to make his point. A dictator who rules well is loved as a king. We could rule justly, and wouldn't that be worth it? To protect those who deserve protection, to save those who need saving. Don't you want to prevent more Quincy massacres? More Bount and Mod soul exterminations? Of course I do, but killing my way to the top isn't the answer. You would only have to kill a few people, Hell Ichigo pointed out reasonably. The Barine for threatening your family. That won't be murder, that's justice. Yamamoto thinks you're unstable and out to get him anyway, he'll try to kill you. If you wait for that, then it's self-defense. After that, you'll be the poor hero who was so misunderstood by Soul Society's leaders. Probably be made a Taicho, maybe even Soteicho. Shut up. I don't want to hear this. Hell Ichigo ignored him. From Soteicho to Spirit King using the already existing Oken, that would make you the leader of 2 realms right there. With your power, It'd be easy to blackmail and threaten a couple of the living world leaders, so then the living world wouldn't pose a problem. You're already king of Hueco Mundo. That's 3 for 3, right there. See, you wouldn't even have to murder anyone, and it's just a couple of kills that you wouldn't even be at fault for. Kill the few to save the many. You made that decision once already, remember? Or have you already forgotten Aizen? DMNU. Ichigo growled, rushing at his double with Zangetsu at the ready, a Getsuga already rushing down it. Too late, hell, Ichigo replied bitterly, meeting Ichigo's attack in kind. The twin Zangetsu clashed against each other, grinding and fighting for dominance over the other. The temptation, the wishing that you were in charge, I can see it in you, Ichigo. Accept it. Why do you fight your destiny to rule, to protect your family? Don't you want to keep them safe by any means necessary? Didn't you swear that you would descend to the pits of hell if you needed to? Ichigo screamed his frustration as he purposely let up the pressure behind Zangetsu, spinning around the incoming blade and swiping at his hell self, who easily leapt back and avoided it. Work with me, Ichigo. Between us, we can keep them safe. Hell, Ichigo begged. You've accepted being a Shinigami, you've accepted being a Hollow, why can't you accept being a Togabido as well? Because I don't want that power, the consequences are too dire. Hell would take me and then I wouldn't be able to protect them anymore. And who says hell would be able to hold you? Hell, Ichigo pointed out. Even without my power, you slaughtered everything in front of you. All those Kushinada, gone. The Togabido, defeated. My power would just make it easier. That just proves I don't need your power, and I don't want it. Get out of my soul. Not a chance. If you won't accept the truth, I'll have to do it for you. I'll save you from your own stubborn naivete.